Do you love novels, but don't have time to read thousands of chapters? Imagine listening to your favorite stories anytime, anywhere, while driving, working, or relaxing. Here, you'll find premium audiobooks from Pocket FM, Audible, Webnovel, Wuxia, and more, all in one place. Every novel is a one-time payment, no subscriptions, no monthly fees, lifetime access. The full novel list and prices are in the description below. Once you choose a novel, just DM me on Telegram, WhatsApp, or Discord. After payment via PayPal, Ko-fi, or Patreon, you get permanent access to the audiobook on Telegram. And if the novel is ongoing, all future updates are included. Check the description, pick your story, and start listening today. Before we start the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button. Enjoy, and let's go.
61. Chapter 61, Daughter of the Evil God. Rinzhu took his first step toward the purple sea, a simple movement that caused the nearest petals to tremble, as if an impossible breeze had swept through that static world. The crystalline glow beneath his skin reflected in countless violet hues, each of his steps creating ripples of light across the field of Udambaras, as though space itself bowed before him. He took another step, and another. The absolute silence of that underground dimension grew almost suffocating, yet it did not disturb him. With the heavenly will crystal body active, nothing there could threaten him, neither the devouring aura of the flowers nor the conscious darkness that permeated the air. But then he stopped. His black pupils reflected the vast, hypnotic, endless undulating ocean of violet flowers, where an impossible interruption existed. A point where the light did not behave as it should, where the petals did not move in the silent rhythm of the others, where even the purple mist seemed hesitant. There, in the perfect center of that lilac sea, stood a figure. She seemed to notice his approach and turned toward him, gazing with a certain curiosity. Rinzhu froze completely, his eyes meeting a pair that emitted a demonic light. The girl's face looked as though it had been carved from jade. With its perfection came an immaturity that only a little girl could possess. On her cream-colored face was a beautiful, exquisite nose that tilted slightly upward, and tender, moist lips that were gently closed. Her silver hair embraced her delicate body all the way down to her feet. A large portion of it even lay upon the cold ground. The hair on her forehead danced though there was no wind, making her jade-white skin appear even more beautiful. Her body was covered in a white radiance, and beneath that radiance it seemed as if she wore no clothes at all. Her pair of delicate white legs were not covered by the white glow and were fully exposed. Her soft, lotus-like feet floated in the air, and each of her snow-white toes shone as if carved from jade. Aside from her long silver hair, her entire being resembled a perfect sculpture of white jade. But the strangest thing of all was her eyes. The upper half of her right eye was pale yellow, while the lower half was a dark green. As for her left eye, the upper half was pale blue, and the lower half was a deep purple. A pair of eyes with 4 different colors. In medical terms, eyes with multiple colors were known as sectoral heterochromia. Yet he had never before seen anyone who truly possessed so many colors in their irises. Even with his mind constantly operating like a perfect machine, he could not prevent the faint surprise that passed through his heart. Cute? The word appeared before he could filter it. Beautiful, too. And that was no exaggeration. She seemed like a little immortal who had been lost, or perhaps mistakenly created, by the heavens, a delicate miracle planted in the middle of a dark hell. The soft glow emanating from her did not repel the Udumbara flowers. On the contrary, it seemed to make the nearby petals lean toward her, as if they recognized a superior existence. On her jade-white skin, the purple light reflected so harmoniously that it created a surreal contrast, as though the girl were the only correct element in a place to which nothing in that world belonged. Rinzhu narrowed his eyes slightly. She was the reason he had come here. Anijia, daughter of the evil god and the heaven-smiting devil emperor. The evil god had been one of the 4 creation gods, direct descendants of the ancestral god's legacy. Among all existences in the primal chaos realm, none possessed an elemental affinity as vast as his. With his profound strength, he could manipulate the natural elements at will, converting his profound energy into any element, and he perfectly mastered the 5 basic powers: fire, water, lightning, earth, and wind. Moreover, he could perfectly control, resist, and absorb the power of darkness, something only his wife, Jieyuan, fully understood. He remembered the story well. The evil god, then known as Anishien, had fallen in love with the heaven-smiting devil emperor, the most powerful among the devil emperors. At some point they married and had a daughter, Anijia. When the heaven-punishing divine emperor, Moe, discovered this forbidden relationship, he could not accept it. He confronted Jieyuan and, wielding the legendary heaven-punishing ancestral sword, tore open the primal chaos wall, banishing the Devil Emperor and her devil gods beyond the primal chaos dimension. Upon realizing that Moe also intended to kill his daughter, Ni Xian engaged him in a violent duel. That great battle between creation gods shook the entire primal chaos realm to the point that detailed records of it still existed today. As for the reason behind the battle, both ancient and modern records stated that the evil god challenged Lord Moe because he was disgusted by his methods and because Moe's actions were unworthy of his title as a creation god. No one knew who had won the battle, not even the other creation gods. Probably only the combatants themselves, Lord Moe and the evil god, ever knew the outcome. But as someone who had read the history of this world, he knew its secrets very well. In short, the evil god both won and lost the battle against Lord Moe. Although Lord Moe had been the leader of the 4 great creation gods, he was also the one who died earliest. He passed away before the war between gods and devils truly began. His death was not caused by injury or accident, he simply reached the end of his lifespan. As the creation god with the greatest divine power, Lord Moe undoubtedly possessed the greatest vitality of any living being. Yet for some reason, his time ran out sooner than any other gods. Only one thing could explain this: the heaven-punishing ancestral sword. However, Lord Moe had used the ancestral sword only once in his entire life, and that was when he tore open the primal chaos wall and sent the heaven-smiting Devil Emperor and her devil gods to the world beyond primal chaos. Although his vitality was greatly reduced as a result, he still should not have died so soon. It made no sense unless he had used the ancestral sword not once, but twice in a short period of time, burning through his lifespan at an accelerated rate. If that were the case, then it was possible. It was highly likely that the second time he used the ancestral sword was during his battle against the evil god. That battle also decided the fate of the evil god and heaven-smiting Devil Emperor's daughter. Without doubt, their child would be half god and half devil, and Lord Moe, being so averse to evil and rigidly just, would never allow such a being to exist in this world, especially since they were descendants of a creation god. That was why he could not afford to lose that battle no matter what. Yet the battle did not go as Lord Moe expected. The original history stated several times that the evil god might have surpassed Lord Moe's power, so Moe probably lost the fight, but he could not accept defeat or its consequences, and so he ultimately decided to use the ancestral sword. The evil god then lost because of the ancestral sword's power. When the two fought, Lord Moe had only recently used the ancestral sword to tear the primal chaos wall. The consequences of using the ancestral sword twice in such quick succession were not as simple as losing double the vitality. That was why Lord Moe died so early. He must have known all the consequences of his decision, but that was exactly the kind of person he was. He was the highest monarch of the god race and leader of the creation gods. He could not tolerate even a single grain of sand in his eyes, especially when that sand offended the pride and accepted boundaries of the god race. The offspring of the evil god and the heaven-smiting Devil Emperor was a girl. Having inherited both the evil god's divine power and the heaven-punishing Devil Emperor's darkness devil power, she was born a hybrid, half-goddess, half-devil, unaccepted by either the god race or the devil race. From what he knew, although Lord Moe defeated the evil god in battle, he understood that the confrontation had been unfair. For that reason, he did not claim the right to completely extinguish the child's existence. Instead, he proposed a compromise. He asked the evil god to eliminate the devil part of his daughter, preserving only the non-devil part so that she could remain among the god race. Faced with the situation, the evil god had no choice. The proposal was the only way to ensure his daughter's survival. He destroyed the child's physical body and split her soul into 2 distinct parts, separating the devil soul from the divine soul. Although reconstructing a complete divine body might seem impossible, such a feat was within the power of a creation god. Splitting the soul, however, meant the complete loss of original memories. The divine soul that would be reborn in a new body would become an entirely different existence from what she had originally been. Moreover, Lord Moe's request contained another restriction. Although the divine soul was allowed to live among the gods, no one could ever know she was the daughter of the evil god and the heaven-smiting Devil Emperor. The evil god himself was forbidden from ever meeting her again. After this event, the evil god entrusted his daughter's divine soul to the god he trusted most, so that he could reconstruct her divine body. The reborn child remained with that god's clan, treated by all as his legitimate daughter. That clan leader devoted himself to giving her absolute protection and the best possible care, because his clan owed the evil god a great debt and was therefore willing to spend every resource necessary to keep her safe and the secret hidden for all eternity. Over time, the evil god himself seemed to sink into disappointment, frustration, and guilt over his daughter's fate. He abandoned his supreme title as the creation god of the elements and began calling himself the evil god. After that, he isolated himself completely, distancing himself from both the god race and the god to whom he had entrusted his daughter, never again interfering in any matters related to them. Though the title Evil God was deeply respected and admired by all living creatures, his choice undeniably carried a feeling of sorrow. As for the child's devil soul, the evil god was emotionally unable to destroy it. Unable to erase it, he used an unknown method to deceive Lord Moe's senses and hid it in a secret place he hastily created. He turned that place into a perfect world of darkness to shelter her and populated it with countless creatures of darkness, fearing she would feel lonely. If he remembered correctly, the evil god probably visited his daughter in the dark world before he created the indestructible blood at the cost of his own life. He deliberately left the darkness seed with her so that the successor of his divine power could find her, receive her guidance, and make the heaven-smiting devil emperor aware of her existence. When devils and gods were still alive, the evil god did not dare visit his daughter at the Cloud's End cliff. When all devils and gods were dead, he finally managed to see her one last time. Yet even that fulfilled wish was oppressed by great sorrow. At that time, the evil god did not know that his other daughter was still alive. He must have died in pain and guilt, believing his other daughter was gone. From what Renzu knew of the story, the terrible battle of that era had directly led to the destruction of gods and devils and to the evil infant catastrophe. However, thanks to the efforts of the clan tasked with protecting the girl with the divine soul, she miraculously survived the calamities inside a profound arc imprinted with the power of the world piercer. As for the devil soul, it was unaffected by the calamities because it remained hidden in a portable world in the lower realms, surviving until the present day. The divine soul of the evil god's daughter had been entrusted to the Spirit Sword Divine clan, whose renown stretched back to the era of gods. The clan's ark was no ordinary vessel. It was a world unto itself, created as a gift from the evil god to the clan during his time as the creation god of the elements. Inside it, her soul could grow in safety, protected by incredible space travel abilities engraved by the evil god himself through the world piercer. That ark was none other than the primordial profound ark, currently in the hands of Scumche. In other words, while the devil's soul stood before his eyes, his enemy already possessed the divine soul, a perfectly fitting outcome for a villain's role. But Renzu still had plans for Honger. Her true name was Ling Wanhu, though publicly she was known as the daughter of the clan chief, Ling Jin. From childhood she was the most pampered child of the Spirit Sword Divine clan, loved unconditionally by the leader and his wife, with no one suspecting her true origin as the evil god's daughter. Fate had decreed that the divine soul be entrusted to the clan, and the clan leader remade Ling Wanhu's body. Because the divine soul was incomplete, he sacrificed part of his own power and soul to allow her to grow until she became whole. Thus Ling Wanhu received divine powers and the abilities of a spirit sword god, including light energy and the ability to transform into a sword. Her unique bloodline also preserved the heritage of the heaven-smiting devil emperor, so that even with the devil part separated, her essence still carried traces of the heaven-punishing devil clan, the race capable of transforming into swords. Thanks to this, Ling Wanhu could assume the form of the heaven-punishing devil slayer sword, an unprecedented combination of the Spirit Sword Divine clan's power and the heaven-punishing devil sword. The coffin of eternity sealed her body and soul, protecting her from devilish poison, while the ark hid her from any world-destroying calamity. The heaven and earth spirit realm, part of the primordial profound ark, remained missing, displaced in a spatial rift, making it impossible even for the evil god to locate his daughter without the world piercer. When transformed into a sword, Ling Wanhu possessed unprecedented power. She was simultaneously the devil slayer sword and the heaven-punishing devil sword, something never seen in ancient times. Her future and limits were unpredictable, making her a unique existence capable of rivaling the creation gods themselves. No clan or race knew methods to devour swords and increase their power. The explanation for her extraordinary strength lay in her singular lineage and tragic destiny. As the daughter of the evil god and the heaven-smiting devil emperor, she was the living testament to the union between gods and devils. Thus Ling Wanhu existed on a level equivalent to a creation god, beyond the comprehension of any ordinary divine spirit. Who wouldn't want someone with such potential? With a faint ironic smile behind his mask, he shook his head, dismissed his thoughts, and calmly walked toward the devil soul of the evil god's daughter. The sea of flowers parted without daring to touch him, the petals bowing in an almost reverential motion. The violet light subtly reflected off the crystal beneath his skin, creating beams that snaked around his steps, illuminating his face with shifting colors. The small figure remained there, floating a few centimeters above the flower field, motionless like a sculpture carved by the heavens themselves. Her large multicolored eyes followed him with growing attention. There was no fear in them, only pure, innocent, almost childlike curiosity. Yet at the same time profound. When the distance between them shrank to less than 3 meters, Renzu stopped. He tilted his head slightly, his expression neutral, but his eyes fixed on hers. "Who are you?" The little girl blinked slowly, the glow in her eyes expanding like 4 colored rings. She tilted her head left, then right, as if analyzing the question. Her silver hair followed the motion like a liquid cascade, sliding through the air and across the ground, reflecting the surrounding violet. The girl's lips parted slightly before gently closing again. Soon they parted and closed once more. It seemed as though she was trying to say something but could make no sound. "You can't speak?" Renzu asked calmly. The girl looked at him silently and nodded. "Then you understand what I'm saying?" he asked again. The girl nodded once more, the 4-colored glow in her eyes firmly fixed on Renzu's masked face. One of his most impressive abilities was that he could discern a person's intent with a single glance. In this girl's gaze there were many things, but he could understand almost none of them. Yet he understood enough to know she was curious about who he was. But he was in no hurry to kidnap her and all the flowers in this place. "Are you a spirit body?" Renzu asked, calmly looking at her while thoughtfully resting his hand on his chin. The girl looked silently, and after some time finally gave a slight nod. "Have you been here a very long time?" Renzu asked. Just as before, the girl simply nodded slightly. As for exactly how long she had been there, perhaps even the little girl no longer knew. "Then," Renzu asked casually, "do you know how to leave this place?" The girl's lips parted slightly, but she neither nodded nor shook her head. The glow in her eyes finally flickered. Renzu observed that silent hesitation, the first real wavering in the girl's gaze since he had arrived. He lightly flexed his fingers, his tone remaining soft yet firm. "If I knew a way out of here," he leaned slightly forward. "Would you like to leave with me?" The little girl froze for an instant, completely, as if the question had resonated far too deeply within her existence. As if, throughout the eternity of solitude in that purple sea, no one had ever said anything like that to her. Then her 4-colored eyes trembled and lit up in an almost childlike way. Curiosity, expectation, and an emotion so fragile that, if put into words, it would shatter. Her head gave a small yes. Tiny yes. Almost shy. Almost hopeful. Renzu took a deep breath as he analyzed her reaction. It was difficult to decipher her emotions, but that much he understood clearly. She wanted to leave. She wanted to see something beyond that eternal abyss. Or at the very least, she wanted to follow him. It had been easier than he expected, but it made sense. She had probably never left this place. And aside from that sea of flowers, she was completely alone. To be honest, it was almost pitiful. "I understand. I have a way to get you out of here, but you'll have to trust me, all right?" he asked gently. The little girl fell silent again, then nodded, making it clear she would trust him to take her away. She herself did not fully understand why, but she simply felt he was someone she could trust. Being near him gave her a strangely comforting, almost familiar sensation. "Do you have a name?" She shook her head. "How about I call you Nije?" The little girl froze the instant the name left Renzu's lips. Her already motionless body became even more still, as though even the surrounding purple mist had lost the right to move. Her large multicolored eyes widened, the 4 hues shining chaotically, as if the name had struck some hidden place within her. Something far too deep to be reached by conscious memory. Her lower lip trembled. Her breathing, if it could be called that, faltered. Her once clear and pure pupils now shimmered like small lakes rippling beneath a silent storm. An emotion slowly formed in them, slow and fragile, almost painful, and utterly incomprehensible. Familiarity, longing, nostalgia, as though that name was something she had lost so long ago that she no longer knew it had ever existed. As though it had been buried beneath eras of silence, and Renzu had just torn it back to the surface. Tiny droplets formed in the corners of her eyes, not full tears, but a moist gleam that made the 4 colors even more vivid, like crystals on the verge of breaking. Renzu lightly furrowed his brows. He had not expected that reaction, much less that intensity. The little girl touched her own throat with tiny hands, as if something inside her hurt or as if she were trying to remember a sound. An echo, a call she had once known. "And I? Jie," Renzu repeated calmly, testing the sound, letting it fall into the space between them like a smooth stone sinking into still water. The little girl flickered. Then, after long seconds that seemed to stretch time itself, she slowly lifted her face. Her rainbow pupils were still moist, but she nodded, slowly, very slowly, as if each movement carried too much emotional weight for her small ethereal body to bear. A yes that said you may call me that. A yes that said this name is mine. A yes that said I don't know why, but I want it to be. Renzu watched her silently for a few moments. "And I Jie then." His voice came out low, gentle, firm enough to anchor the name in the air. From now on, that's what I'll call you. The girl, now Anijia, lowered her eyes for a moment, almost embarrassed by her own reaction, and lightly pressed her fingers against her chest, as if trying to hold that name inside so it would not escape again. Anijia raised her gaze once more, fixing Rinzhu with curiosity more intense than before, now mixed with something new. Something only he had brought to the surface. Something she had never felt until that moment. And Rinzhu, noticing this, simply took one slow, gentle step toward her and extended his hand. Come, Anijia. Let's leave this place. Anijia raised a delicate little hand, hesitating for an instant before touching Rinzhu's. The contact was light, almost as if she were testing whether it was real. The crystal beneath his skin reflected the violet glow of the flowers, and her touch seemed to intensify the surrounding energy, causing it to ripple gently. Her multicolored eyes locked onto his with a mixture of curiosity and fascination. She blinked several times, as if absorbing every detail of that contact she had never imagined possible. Rinzhu observed the gesture calmly, a faint smile appearing beneath his mask. There's no need to be afraid, Anijia. I'm here to help you, not to hurt you. Anijia tilted her head, still holding his hand, and her rainbow eyes shone more brightly. An almost imperceptible smile appeared on her lips, revealing the restrained excitement she was trying to hide. Why did he suddenly feel like a creepy uncle offering candy to kidnap a little girl? /N. Did you enjoy the chapter? Then you should know that over on my Patreon you can read up to 20 chapters ahead for just $5. And yes, for that price you also get full access to all of my content. That's right, cheaper than a snack, and with way more drama, action, and guaranteed emotional damage. The link is right below. See you there. My Patreon. Patreon.com/fanficnovels. Thank you so much for your support. You make all of this worthwhile. 62. Chapter 62 Laws of Space. In ancient times, the god race and the devil race stood on opposite sides of an abyss that no one dared to cross. There was no middle ground, only a deep, insatiable animosity that persisted generation after generation. The fact that Moe, the monarch of the god race, had once acted with such cruelty toward the daughter of the evil god was merely further proof of that blind hostility. Yet what few truly understood was that there was no legitimate reason for such hatred. The ancestral goddess had created both the god race and the devil race, one as the manifestation of Yang, the other of Yin. If both were works of the ancestral god, were they truly so different beyond the nature of the power they wielded? Many in the god realm believed the devil race to be a strange existence, something that did not belong in this world. They despised the devil race profoundly. However, if they were truly alien to creation, why would the ancestral god have bothered to create such a race? Would the god race alone not have been enough? The good or evil of a living being has nothing to do with the power it possesses, nor with its divine or demonic origin. But over time, the simple word devil became twisted until it became synonymous with pure evil. And that belief persists to this day. When a conviction takes root so deeply that it becomes common sense, almost no force in the world is capable of changing it. The belief that all devils are intrinsically evil had become as solid and widespread as the notion that fire and water can never coexist. He knew this better than anyone. For that reason, although he could wield the profound diabolical energy of darkness thanks to his absolute mastery of the law of darkness, he chose to avoid it whenever possible. He would only use it when it was absolutely necessary or when he was strong enough to be truly invincible in this world. But the reason Rinzhu was thinking about all this was simple. He had found a way to refine the dimension created by the evil god to hide his daughter's devil soul. In truth, turning that place into a portable personal realm was not all that complicated with the help of the ancestral spatial symbol, a supreme treasure of spatial manipulation. Besides refining the space, he also planned to devour the ancestral demonic beasts that inhabited it and use their essences to gradually strengthen his cultivation. As he looked at Jinya, who was holding his hand, still under the effects of the heavenly will crystal body that allowed her to touch his spiritual body, Rinzhu also had an idea of how, in the future, he could help her recover her soul. It was clear that she possessed an extremely high affinity with darkness, and his intention was to nourish her with some special pills and create a new body for her. Little by little, she would become an existence similar to Honger. However, she probably would not be able to transform into a sword like the divine soul even following that path. From what he knew, that ability only manifested when Honger reunited with her in the future. Still, even if Jinya were incapable of that feat for now, once he finally got his hands on Honger, everything would change. Rinzhu observed Jinya carefully, feeling the weight of what he had planned and, at the same time, the silent responsibility of guiding someone so young and pure along a path that even she did not yet understand. He gently squeezed her hand, conveying calm and confidence. The little girl looked up at him, clearly curious about the gesture. as if trying to read every nuance of his expression and aura. Her rainbow-colored eyes blinked, reflecting the violet light of the flower field, revealing fascination and a slight childish curiosity. When we leave this place, the world will be vast, different from everything you have ever seen, he said in a soft yet firm voice. There will be dangers, challenges, and things you may not understand. But I will be by your side, and you need not be afraid. Jinya gazed at him with an almost palpable intensity, her small hands lightly squeezing his as a silent plea not to leave her alone. Excitement and fascination were evident, mingled with a pure innocence that Renzu knew he had to preserve for as long as possible. You trust me, don't you? He asked, still holding her hand. She nodded without hesitation. The four hues of her eyes shone with newly found trust, reflecting not only curiosity but also a silent faith that only someone who had known complete solitude could place in another who promised to take her away from it. Renzu took a deep breath and slowly released Ji Nye's hand. Wait here for a moment, he said, his voice gentle, almost comforting. The reason he had reached out to her was not merely to convey trust, but to carefully analyze the composition of her spiritual body. Ji Nye remained silent, simply watching him with curiosity. Her rainbow eyes reflected fascination and an almost childlike patience, as though she understood that something important was about to happen but did not know exactly what. She did not protest, did not move, and simply waited. Renzu closed his eyes for a moment, sitting cross-legged in the middle of the sea of flowers in a meditative posture, while the crystal beneath his skin shimmered with greater intensity, reflecting violet tones that blended with the ambient light. Although it was relatively simple to transform the entire dimension into a portable personal realm, he intended to make the most of the opportunity to accelerate his comprehension of the law of space, an idea he had had ever since he began walking the path of space using the 10 Extreme Daos technique. His plan was to use that technique to completely absorb the ancestral spatial symbol, devouring that treasure in exchange for absolute compression of the spatial element. It would be the first time he used this cultivation method from a higher world at its full potential. To be honest, he still did not fully understand the secrets behind it, but he would discover them in time. From what he knew, the ancestral symbols were among the most powerful objects in the entire universe, each possessing its own symbolic spirit. They had not been created by mortal hands, they were pure condensations of the laws of heaven and earth. Each ancestral symbol carried enough power to split the heavens, and whoever obtained one would become a supreme existence beneath the sky. It was said that when the 8 great ancestral symbols were born in ancient times, the ancestral symbol of life and death was the last to emerge. Because it was small and weak, it ended up being swallowed by the devouring ancestral symbol, which supplied it with energy until it grew. Only when it reached its full form was the ancestral symbol of life and death able to leave the interior of the devourer. In other words, the ancestral symbols were heavenly treasures, existences capable of protecting, and if they so desired, destroying the entire world. And he was going to devour one of them. But first, taking a deep breath, Renzu began his plan. The ancestral spatial symbol appeared in the palm of his right hand. He did not hesitate. With a simple act of will, he activated the first stage. The entire dimension was converted into his personal domain. The process took less than the blink of an eye and felt so natural that it seemed the space had existed from the beginning solely to become part of him. And then he began devouring the ancestral symbol. He activated the 10 Extreme Daos at full power. His entire body became a collapsing star. Boom! An immortal aura exploded from within him, rising from the depths of his body. The ancestral symbol unfolded like a cosmic flower, blooming into pure spatial essence, and the 10 Extreme Daos technique devoured it without the slightest hesitation. The symbol melted into liquid threads of absolute space, and he was swallowed by them. His mind plunged into depths that belonged neither to mortals, gods, nor devils. He was no longer sitting in the sea of flowers. He was in space, literally. A white-gray void stretched infinitely in all directions, silent and eternal. Fractures of other worlds glimmered in the distance like luminous veins. Primordial patterns, the very formulas of the birth of laws themselves, danced before his eyes. Enlightenment flooded his mind like an unending deluge. But that was not all. This was the first time he had used his cultivation method with its full power. Suddenly something changed. All the diabolical darkness energy existing in that realm erupted at once. And then, everything was pulled toward him. The darkness surged like a furious sea, sweeping away the violet flower field and gathering into a colossal vortex that converged on Renzu's motionless body, as if he were a conscious black hole. Gigantic currents of diabolical darkness energy, previously silent and static, tore through the air and invaded his pores, flooding his profound veins. The 10 Extreme Daos technique instantly refined everything, giving the energy no chance to resist. Every drop of that diabolical darkness energy was sucked in as though returning to its true master, and immediately refined. fused into his profound veins, propelling his cultivation forward at an overwhelming pace. 6th level of the Emperor Profound Realm. 7th level of the Emperor Profound Realm. 8th level of the Emperor Profound Realm. 9th level of the Emperor Profound Realm. 10th level of the Emperor Profound Realm. Despite his cultivation advancing at a terrifying speed, his foundation remained perfect, so stable that it could be considered the most flawless foundation in the entire primordial chaos. Even as his level rose like an unstoppable whirlwind, he remained deeply immersed in the mysterious truths of the laws of space, with nothing disturbing his clarity. On the other hand, Jinya, who watched in silence, showed no fear at the sight of so much energy rushing toward him. Her rainbow eyes stayed fixed on him, reflecting the black waves that surrounded him. Then she raised the small sphere of dark light. The light inside it was black as ink, yet at the same time so pure that it seemed to sing. It was practically a dark-colored marble. The darkness seed. Something that only the heir of the evil god could absorb. The evil god's legacy was the inheritance left by one of the most powerful creation gods of the primordial era. This legacy could only be obtained through a single drop of the evil god's indestructible blood. A drop of immortal blood that contained the very source of his power. Only an heir could receive this legacy, for the evil god had annihilated his own divine powers and sacrificed 600,000 years of his life to create that single drop of blood. He had given up his existence to leave one last hope for the future. That drop of immortal blood also carried a memory imprint explaining everything that came with accepting the legacy. Once someone accepted the evil god's legacy, their original profound veins would be destroyed and reconstructed according to the pattern of the evil god's own profound veins, meaning they would completely lose all previous cultivation and have to start over from scratch. However, after the reconstruction of the profound veins and the opening of all profound entrances, the heir would gain access to the 7 gates of the evil god's secret arts and their respective profound abilities. Moreover, the heir could also utilize the evil god's seeds, provided they managed to find them, thereby obtaining perfect immunity to the elements. Without hesitation, Jinya reached out her hand. The sphere glowed, and it was instantly sucked toward Rinzu. The seed shot through the air, leaving a trail of living darkness that rippled like liquid smoke. The moment it touched the energy field around him, it ceased to exist as an object. It was absorbed, but it was not the only one. From the special ring on Rinzu's finger, the lightning seed, as though drawn by something, floated out on its own, only to be immediately swallowed by the energy field as well. This should have been impossible without possessing the evil god's profound veins. Yet it became possible thanks to the 10 extreme Daos cultivation method, which came from a world far superior to this one. A true universe of immortals whose existence infinitely surpassed that of profound practitioners. A cultivation method from a higher world was relentlessly domineering when used at its peak. Anything containing an elemental law was instantly attracted and devoured, without resistance, without warning, without mercy. Even the elemental energy that naturally circulated in that space was consumed, as if merely returning to a law older than the heavens themselves. The moment he devoured the 2 evil god seeds, his cultivation surged once more. Bang! After a strange sound that resonated in Rinzu's soul, the bottleneck that countless powerful cultivators had tried to break throughout their entire lives shattered in an instant. A dense, profound aura began circulating calmly within his profound veins, like a layer of clouds. First level of the Tyrant Profound Realm. By his own estimates, if he fully absorbed the 9 Suns Jade, he could reach the Tyrant Profound Realm. Yet even without consuming half the energy of that jade, he had managed to reach this level, and in a far shorter time than anticipated. All thanks to the abyssal diabolical darkness energy and the 2 evil god seeds. And most impressively, in both cases there still remained a true ocean of energy to be devoured. He had not even absorbed half of it. Thus, without noticing, hours passed while his cultivation advanced at breakneck speed. /N. Did you enjoy the chapter? Then you should know that over on my Patreon you can read up to 20 chapters ahead for just $5. And yes, for that price you also get full access to all of my content. That's right. Cheaper than a snack, and with way more drama, action, and guaranteed emotional damage. The link is right below. See you there. My Patreon. Patreon.com/fanficnovels. Thank you so much for your support. You make all of this worthwhile. 63. Chapter 63, Profound Strength Breakthrough. Several hours passed in the blink of an eye. The silent sea of flowers seemed frozen in time, motionless and untouched, while all the furious darkness being drawn toward Rinzu, as though he were a black hole, was completely devoured. When the process ended, all that remained in that space was ordinary darkness, devoid of any aura. Yet even after consuming all the environmental energy and even the evil god's seeds, Rinzu had still not awakened from his meditation. His profound veins had transformed into a spectacle of vivid colors. Golden lines glowed like threads of liquid light, intertwining with traces of black so deep they resembled a bottomless abyss. These two colors, magnificent and imposing, dominated the entire array, radiating a beauty that surpassed any description. The black occupied the center, vast and dense, like a primordial core that absorbed everything around it. In contrast, the golden threads wound through that darkness, shimmering with an almost divine intensity. The other colors, red, green, purple, and gray, orbited around these two forces, delicate as distant constellations. Yet it was the harmonious confrontation between absolute darkness and golden light that truly shaped that inner landscape, making it as mesmerizing as it was unfathomable. The profound strength contained within them had become truly terrifying. If before it had been merely a glass of water, it had now expanded into a vast ocean. The difference between then and now was so abyssal it seemed to compare two entirely distinct worlds. In this world, this was the most powerful level of profound strength. He had reached the first level of the sovereign profound realm. There were 3 reasons for this. The first was that he had absorbed practically all the diabolical darkness aura present in the dimension created by the evil god, an amount of energy even greater than that contained in the 9 Suns jade he had received from the Golden Crow. The second reason was the absorption of the 2 evil god seeds, brimming with an immense amount of condensed elemental profound energy. That alone would have been enough to elevate any profound practitioner who possessed the evil god's veins by several levels at once. The third reason was the absorption of the ancestral spatial symbol, a treasure formed by the very laws of heaven and earth. In truth, if any other cultivator had absorbed all these combined energies, they would have easily reached the divine profound realm and far beyond it. But his profound veins demanded an infinitely greater amount of energy than those of an ordinary practitioner. Thus, even after devouring all of this, they were still far from reaching the divine profound realm. Even so, he had attained the highest level of profound strength in this world. Leaping directly from the 5th level of the Emperor Profound Realm, he had crossed the entire Tyrant Profound Realm and ascended to the long-coveted Sovereign Profound Realm, the pinnacle sought by all profound practitioners. Yet despite this colossal leap, he barely felt any difference. Part of it was because his mind had been completely immersed in comprehending the spatial laws during cultivation. Another part was because, to him, the level of profound energy had always been merely a detail. With the experience he had accumulated after facing hundreds of millions of opponents as powerful as himself, his devastating profound arts, and above all, his incomparably superior body, trying to measure his strength based on cultivation level would be the worst mistake anyone could make. On the other hand, although he clearly felt the transformation of his profound strength and, as always, faced no difficulty in controlling it perfectly, Renzu kept his focus on comprehending the path of space. His efforts were quickly rewarded when he finally achieved complete understanding. Space is not emptiness. It is not absence, but rather the vast primordial sea from which all life springs. It is an inherent property of all matter. It is not that space contains matter, but rather that its existence can only be measured after the emergence of the countless things that define it. The immensity of space is like the existence of man and woman to humanity. Only after the birth of humanity itself do these concepts gain meaning. Likewise, only after matter emerges does space acquire essence and purpose. The truth, however, ran even deeper. Time and space have always coexisted as a single, indivisible existence. If a force field were powerful enough to distort space, it would inevitably alter the flow of time as well. Thus, it was not strange that both were affected simultaneously, for they were 2 faces of the same primordial law. The axis of space, the eons that have stretched since time immemorial, the universe, in its totality, was merely the eternal fusion of space and time. He had finally achieved complete understanding of the path of space. And just as had happened with all the other elements when he reached the highest level through his cultivation method, that 10 extreme Taoists, this absolute, perfect, and irreversible understanding caused everything related to that law to spontaneously bow to his will. More than that, absolutely nothing that depended on the element space could affect him against his will. Distance, location, confinement, transfer, dimensional gaps, distortions, all had become irrelevant before him. The entirety of space, from the smallest point to the greatest conceivable expanse, was subordinate to his will, just like all the other elements. When he finally concluded his comprehension and his consciousness returned to his physical senses, Renzu noticed something even more astonishing. The dimension created by the evil god had effectively become his own subspace, as he himself had named it. Previously, he had merely used the ancestral spatial symbol to envelop that place, turning it into a temporary extension of himself, almost as if he had stored the dimension within his own personal space. But now it was different. After completely devouring the ancestral spatial symbol, the bond between them had become absolute. The dimension was no longer an external space being carried by him, it was something intrinsically connected to his being, almost as if it had become his inner world. It was a concept too complex to explain precisely, but the sensation was clear. That entire plane, formerly belonging to the evil god, now functioned as a personal domain, fully integrated into his essence. He could access it whenever he wished, carry it with him anywhere, and above all, no one but him could ever enter it. Unfortunately, he would still have to deal with all the ancestral diabolical beasts that inhabited that space. Another issue was that the appearance of the subspace could not yet be modified. His understanding of the other laws simply wasn't deep enough to reshape an entire dimension. But that didn't bother him. It was only a matter of time. In the future, once he mastered other laws beyond those he already possessed, space, darkness, fire, lightning, and light, he would be perfectly capable of molding that inner world according to his own will. But setting those 2 points aside, the greatest advantage of having transformed the evil god's former dimension into his own subspace was simple and undeniable. All the underworld Adumber flowers now belonged to him. There was no longer any need to ask Jinya for permission or wonder whether he could take them with him. They were part of his domain, part of his newly established authority. Moreover, Jinya could remain there whenever she wished, resting or sleeping while accompanying him on his journeys. For her, it wasn't merely convenient, it was perfect. That dark, silent environment wrapped in an ancient aura was exactly the kind of atmosphere that felt natural and familiar to her. Renzu slowly opened his eyes. His black pupils seemed far deeper, as if they reflected the darkness that existed before the creation of the universe. And the first thing he saw was her. Jinya was floating less than a handspan from his face, the girl's multicolored eyes silently studying him. Ever since he had entered meditation, her gaze had not shifted even once. It wasn't the look of someone observing a stranger, it was the look of someone admiring their own world. Her silver hair fell like a curtain of liquid moonlight, gently brushing his cheek. She did not blink. She simply stared, as if she had spent the last several hours right there, waiting for the exact second he would emerge from meditation. Renzu raised an eyebrow. Sorry for taking so long. Jinya did not reply with words, but her eyes brightened even more. She tilted her head to the left, then to the right, then brought her face 1 centimeter closer, as if confirming he was real. Renzu let out a short, amused sigh. You were waiting for me, huh? The little girl nodded, looking at him with curiosity. Renzu waved his hand through the air as if brushing away the last remnant of a distant dream, letting out a soft, almost lazy murmur. I've already done everything that needed to be done with this place. Now all that's left is to help you, and then we can leave. Jinya seemed a little emotional. Her expression didn't change much, but her eyes filled with anticipation. Noticing her gaze, Renzu smiled faintly beneath his mask and raised his left hand. A red glow ignited in his palm. First a gentle flicker, then a living, vibrant flame that burst into a deep crimson like boiling heavenly blood. The divine flames of the vermilion bird rippled around his fingers before gathering, compressing, folding upon themselves until they took shape. A cauldron of fire with no base, no metal, no weight. Merely the pure manifestation of the law of fire bending to his will. Renzu traced a finger through the air in a simple, almost indifferent gesture, and immediately dozens of profound herbs emerged from his spatial ring, each glowing with a distinct color and releasing fragrances as potent as the surrounding sea of violet flowers. Destiny Reversal Lotus, Primordial Spirit Fire Essence, Nebulous Swan Root, Thousand Night Moon Pearl, Supreme Soul Dew, and 9 Lives 9 Deaths Flower. More than 108 types of rare herbs. In the next instant, they all rose like tiny living constellations, floating toward the blazing cauldron. The moment they touched the heat of the flames, the air distorted. The herbs spun, dissolved, reconstituted themselves, intertwining in patterns that only someone with his mastery of alchemy could achieve. Every spark, every drop of herbal essence was guided with absolute precision by the slightest movements of his fingers. It was undoubtedly an art that only Renzu could perform. And Jinya, the silent little girl, did not take her eyes off him for even a single instant. When the flames appeared, her eyes widened as if witnessing a spectacle she had never imagined could exist. She slowly drifted closer, almost gliding through the air. She floated until she was beside him, so close that her silver hair lightly brushed his arm. She remained there, motionless, utterly hypnotized. The aura of the herbs reflected in her multicolored irises like fireworks trapped inside a crystal globe. She tilted her head, following his every tiny movement with pure, simple fascination. The kind of fascination that exists only in someone who has never seen the world, and who, for the first time, was seeing something beautiful. Renzu noticed it. He always noticed everything. One corner of his mouth lifted in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Inside the cauldron, the mixture suddenly exploded into light. Not violent, but intense enough to illuminate the entire subspace. A perfect, radiant sphere took shape, glowing with pure energy. A newly created pill. A pill that had never existed before. For someone who carried the legacy of the creation goddess of life, which contained absolutely everything imaginable about medicine in this world, creating new pills tailored to different herbs, properties, and each patient's condition was as natural as breathing. Perhaps it was because of the legacy, or perhaps it was simply because he was an unparalleled genius who made the impossible trivial. When he had previously analyzed Jean Ye's condition by holding her hand, countless solutions had instantly appeared in his mind. The main problem was clear. She existed only as the devil soul, the demonic half of the evil god's daughter soul. In other words, her spiritual body was incomplete, reduced to just one part of the original soul. His idea, therefore, was to restore Jean Ye's soul to its full state, just as they had once done with Hunger, who was the divine soul of the evil god's daughter. To that end, he created the heavenly full soul Empress pill, an entirely new medicine conceived by his own hands. Its purpose was simple to explain yet extraordinary in execution. To partially restore Jean Ye's devil soul, strengthening and refining it until it approached the state of a complete soul, even without its original other half. In essence, this pill would grant her a full spiritual body capable of interacting with the world, manifesting stably, and everything else. It was not the perfect restoration Renzu desired, but it was the best he could do at that moment. Jean Ye leaned in further, her eyes as wide as a child watching a magic trick for the first time in her life. Renzu closed his hand around the small luminous sphere, feeling the gentle, rhythmic pulse of the concentrated energy within. The pill was warm, vibrant, as if a tiny sleeping heart were beating in his hands. He turned to Jean Ye, who still watched him with that motionless, wonder-filled gaze, as if beholding something sacred. "It's for you." His voice came out low, calm, almost like a gentle invitation. He extended his open hand, revealing the pill that glowed like a small blue-red sun in the center of his palm. "Eat it." Jean Ye slowly raised her face. Her multicolored eyes sparkled, reflecting the pill's light like polished crystals under moonlight. She didn't seem to fully understand what it meant, but she trusted him in that absolute, silent way that belongs only to someone who had never had anyone to trust before. She took a hesitant step forward, brought her small hands, almost trembling, toward it, and touched the pill with her fingertips. The gentle warmth it radiated made her eyes widen a little more. The little girl nodded slowly, with a tiny, almost shy gesture. Slowly, she brought the pill to her lips. Renzu watched in silence as she tilted her head and swallowed the radiant sphere in one go. The moment the pill disappeared into her mouth, a subtle glow coursed through her spiritual body, like clear water being poured over transparent glass. Jean Ye's already nearly imperceptible breathing became even lighter. Then her eyes blinked once, twice, and in the next instant, the little girl swayed to the side, too drowsy to keep her body stable. Renzu raised his hand in a natural reflex, enveloping her with a gentle ripple of space. Her body floated for a moment, light as a petal blown by the wind. She fell sideways, not onto the hard ground that had never existed there, but onto the sea of violet flowers, which molded around her like a welcoming nest. Jean Ye instinctively curled up, pulling her knees to her chest, her little hands near her face, exactly like a kitten falling asleep in the lap of someone it had just learned to love. Her silver hair spread in soft waves over the flower petals. Soon afterward, a bluish energy began to emerge around her. It was a clear, calm, almost maternal light. It enveloped the small spiritual body of Jean Ye, permeating every fragment, every crack, every flaw that had been imposed by existing as half a soul. The light pulsed slowly, as if breathing with her, nourishing, strengthening, rebuilding. Renzu stood there, silently watching the scene. He sighed. "It'll take some time before you wake up." His eyes traced the sleeping girl's form. Jean Ye looked so fragile, so small, yet the energy surrounding her was tranquil and steady, like a protective cocoon being woven around her. He gently brushed a strand of her silver hair aside, just to keep it from falling over her face. "Hopefully, by the time you open your eyes again," his voice dropped lower, almost a murmur, "I'll have already taken Hunger back from that scum-che." That part of the subspace fell silent as his figure completely vanished, heading toward the ancestral diabolical beasts. /N. Did you enjoy the chapter? Then you should know that over on my Patreon you can read up to 20 chapters ahead for just $5. And yes, for that price you also get full access to all of my content. That's right, cheaper than a snack, and with way more drama, action, and guaranteed emotional damage. The link is right below. See you there. My Patreon. Patreon.com/fanfictionnovels. Thank you so much for your support. You make all of this worthwhile. 64. Chapter 64. Killing the Ancestral Diabolic Beasts. The transition was almost imperceptible. A slow blink, and the gentle silence of the sea of flowers dissolved like ink washed away by rain. Renzu softly reappeared in the original darkness, that vast, formless expanse where silence was so profound it seemed to carry weight. It was the same place as before, where he had sensed the ancestral diabolic beasts. He lifted his chin, staring into the infinite void as one contemplates a starless sky, and murmured under his breath, "Let's see what kind of beasts you really are." Having said that, he agitated his profound energy and enveloped his entire body in the golden flames of the golden crow, deliberately drawing the attention of the creatures around him. It took no more than a second for the beasts to react immediately. HSSS. AOOUU. Roar. Roars shattered the absolute silence like blades slicing through the air. Everything trembled. A heavy wind whipped his robes and lashed his black hair backward, while a dense, suffocating aura poured over him like a mountain on the verge of collapse. The beasts charged toward him at an absurd speed, far beyond anything a profound practitioner at the monarch level could achieve. They were coming. Boom, 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 boom. The footsteps of the largest monster in front echoed ever closer. With each impact, Renzu felt the sound reverberate inside his chest, disrupting the rhythm of his own heart. Yet he felt neither fear nor discomfort. In truth, a faint excitement stirred at the thought of the powers he was about to test, and use to kill. The presence of any foreign organism in that abyss was extraordinarily rare. Being an entity completely alien to that world, Renzu naturally attracted the dark, ferocious creatures that dwelled there and would be relentlessly hunted by them. In just a few breaths, the ancestral diabolic beasts reached his position. The silent, shadowy world transformed in an instant. The air became tainted with a malignant aura capable of eclipsing the heavens, and a deep, savage roar arose, wild and devastating, strong enough to shake heaven and earth, as the creature charged straight at him. No one in the profound sky continent, the azure cloud continent, or the illusory demon realm had ever seen or heard of the gigantic beast before him. No record of it existed in any of the three continents. It was an existence completely unknown, one that surpassed all common knowledge. It was a glazed perdition bird. This beast, feared in the era of gods and devils, inhabited the valley of diabolic mist of calamity. Its body, resembling tempered glass harder than steel, reflected a dark sheen. Its speed was terrifying. A single flap of its wings could generate a black hurricane, swallowing everything around it in an infernal catastrophe. Yet everyone knew that not long after the era of devils and gods ended with their mutual annihilation, the energy of the northern primal chaos dimension was gradually assimilated by the energies of the southern primal chaos dimension. The element of darkness had grown slowly and more sparsely, leading the injured dark devils to extinction roughly 50 to 60,000 years ago. These diabolic beasts had not appeared since. Nevertheless, this strange dark world truly concealed diabolic beasts that should have been extinct long ago. Scree! The glazed perdition bird folded its wings and suddenly plummeted from the sky like lightning. All around, the dark space twisted into whirlpools, distorting the darkness itself. Beneath the radiant golden light emanating from Renzu's body, the creature's glazed feathers reflected a prismatic glow. Yet there was nothing beautiful about the sight. The light dancing across its surface resembled the cold gleam of serpent scales, a sheen that sent chills down the spine of anyone who dared to look. The glazed feathers reflected the scorching gold radiating from Renzu's body. What happened next took place in a single instant and nothing more. The glazed perdition bird dove, tearing through space like a glass spear thirsty for blood. The wind screamed. The entire abyss seemed to tilt to follow the attack. Renzu merely lifted his chin. The golden flames of the golden crow rippled around him, flowing like solar seas, dense, perfectly controlled, without a single wisp wasted. His silhouette, illuminated in that way, appeared almost cruel, the splendor of a sun that had chosen to descend upon the world solely to destroy. His body leaned slightly forward. And then, 10th stage, profound energy erupted. Heavenly fury of the 9 suns. The world trembled. Behind Renzu, lights ignited one after another, each setting the abyss ablaze with a brilliance so pure and devastating that darkness fled like a living creature. One sun was born, then another, and another, until 9 solar orbs blazed in the darkness, orbiting in destructive paths, each radiating heat capable of evaporating oceans and turning mountains to vapor in a single second. The glazed perdition bird flapped its wings to retreat, sensing immense danger, but it was too late. In a single white golden flash, the world roared in gold. Space cracked with luminous fissures, lines snaking like shattered glass on the verge of collapse. Solar radiation devoured the monster head-on, wrenching forth an agonized shriek that was smothered before it could finish. It was simply burned until nothing but ashes remained. Renzu let his hand fall to his side. The violent golden flames withdrew, tame and obedient, as though tamed by a god. He frowned slightly. How inconvenient! He murmured, gazing at the emptiness where the beast had been. Had he not possessed absolute control over his profound energy, the cost of that technique would have been absurd. After all, killing a glazed perdition bird, a creature at the pinnacle of the divine profound realm, while he himself was still in the sovereign profound realm, should have been impossible. Yet he succeeded because his mastery over profound energy was so perfect that he expended not even 1/100th of his reserves to execute a technique that would normally have drained a substantial portion of his entire energy. Moreover, thanks to the 10 extreme Daos technique and his profound veins transformed by the prime world liquid, his profound energy was vastly superior to that of any practitioner at the same level. And of course, the golden crow flames used in his attack were far from mere decoration. Because his compression of the law of fire had reached the highest possible level, an attack executed with the burning world scripture of the golden crow could surpass even the power of a true golden crow at the same cultivation level, all due to his absolute control over the law of fire. Well, he had been a little reckless by not using the vermilion bird flames, which were incomparably more suited for dealing with devils. However, since he was merely testing things after finally reaching the first level of the sovereign profound realm, he simply had no intention of using them at that moment. He was satisfied with his current profound strength. Suddenly, new roars erupted from the darkness. Renzu lifted his gaze, and a faint smile crossed his lips beneath the mask. Boom! The explosion shook the heavens, and the surface of the pitch black cracked wildly. Using the golden crow flames enveloping his body for illumination, he could finally see the true appearance of that gigantic shadow. It stood approximately 165 meters tall, its head extremely broad and resembling a cross between a wolf and a bear. Its 4 limbs were thick and powerful, its head and body bristling with white fangs. The sharp tips of those fangs gleamed with an infernal light that would make fear seep into one's soul. An enormous, long black tail arched over its head, its tip shining with the same icy glow a blade would possess. It was the 9 Desolation Fong Devil. This was a creature that had coexisted with devils in the northern part of the primal chaos dimension during the ancient era, a primordial diabolic beast. The roar of the 9 Desolation Fong Devil reverberated like ancestral thunder, so deep and ancient it seemed torn directly from the roots of the world. The creature raised its colossal head, its eyes fixed on Renzu with pure killing intent. Renzu did not look away. Unhurried, he raised both hands. Clang! With a single thought, without even stirring a ripple in the surrounding energy, twin swords materialized as if they had always been in his grasp. They were twin swords, one of the swords he had found most difficult to subdue within the boundless sword fist. They bore the name, Immortal Mystic Scarlet Blood Sword. But they did not come alone. Behind Renzu, the air shuddered, and then, whoosh, 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 1,000 subswords materialized simultaneously, filling the space like stars of metal. Each carried an incomparably sharp aura, and that was only the beginning. He activated the boundless sword art. The abyss exploded with light. 10,000 swords appeared, all vibrating, aligning like a heavenly army answering the call of their sovereign. In the blink of an eye, they claimed the sky, the ground, the horizon, each blade suspending its own small storm of energy, as if protesting having been restrained for so long. Renzu, enveloped in golden flames, the solar glow reflecting across the infinite sea of swords, resembled a sword god descended to exterminate the world. He bent his knees and leaped. The leap itself made no sound, but the impact of his presence upon the air caused space to ripple. He landed upright on one of the floating swords as though standing on solid ground. The other blades reacted instantly. Zuuum! In a movement so perfectly synchronized it seemed choreographed by a sword immortal, the 10,000 swords surged forward. It was an inverted rain. Instead of falling, they rose, advanced, tore, and pierced through space toward the gigantic monster. The 9 Desolation Fong Devil roared, unleashing a wave of malignant energy that would make any monarch fall to their knees and bleed from the eyes. But the swords paid no heed. They did not stop. The sharp light of the blades advanced with lightning speed, and in that instant Renzu vanished among them, moving with cold, lethal grace, conducting the slaughter like the maestro of a divine massacre. The full assault took a single breath. The colossal body of the 9 Desolation Fong Devil was simply shredded. The primordial monster was sliced into hundreds, thousands of tiny fragments, so perfectly severed they had no time even to fall. Then, at last, boom! The body disintegrated into a black rain of diabolic flesh, dissolving like soot beneath the heat of the golden crow flames surrounding Renzu. A heavy silence fell for less than half a second, and then the abyss plunged into pure despair. Scree! Roar! For glazed shadows emerged simultaneously in the sky, like black stars born from darkness itself. Their translucent bodies reflected fragments of golden light from Rinzu's flames, creating a distorted mosaic of light. They were more glazed perdition birds. At the same time, two new Nine Desolation Fong devils emerged from fissures in the pitch black. They attacked together. But Renzu did not retreat a single step. The 10,000 swords surrounding him vibrated with fierce anticipation, like starving wolves awaiting only the order to devour. And he gave it, not with words but with a faint smile. Fwum! The swords erupted in flames. Yet they were not merely the golden flames of the golden crow. They were also the crimson flames of the vermilion bird, wild, pure, absolute, burning everything related to darkness. They were not the flames most feared by the diabolic race for no reason. Every sword blazed with a terrifying crimson, a light that seemed to tear small pieces of reality as it advanced. In an instant, each blade became a solar meteor. The golden flames roared like living suns. The crimson flames writhed like an infernal storm. United, they transformed into a force capable of incinerating the world. Zu Oamum. 1,000 swords surged, then 2,000, 3,000, until all 10,000 plunged like a divine storm, each leaving a trail of luminous destruction that rent space like shattered glass. The glazed perdition birds dove in counterattack. The flames around the swords instantly doubled, as soldiers kneeling before their king. Whoosh! The golden flames enveloped the crimson. The crimson intensified the golden. He had essentially fused the golden crow flames with the vermilion bird flames as if it were nothing. Thanks to his profound comprehension of the law of fire, performing something so absurd was, to him, as simple as eating or drinking. The first glazed perdition bird was pierced by 100 blades at once. The sound was crisp, like glass shattering. Crack! The creature broke into dozens of glittering fragments, each burning in crimson and golden flames until it vanished completely. The second tried to dodge, flapping its wings and creating a black hurricane. The swords did not care. They tore through the tornado and pierced its body like a rain of heavenly fire. Boom! Ashes. The third attempted to flee, an instantly fatal mistake. Renzu pointed one of his twin swords and murmured, "Stellar Sword Prison." The swords around him instantly rearranged, forming a perfect circle, then a sphere, then a three-dimensional cage forged with the aid of spatial laws. The glazed bird slammed into the transparent, burning interior and melted. The fourth opened its beak to unleash a wave of destructive energy, but Renzu was already behind it. He appeared in absolute silence, as though he had leaped between heartbeats. The twin sword in his hand traced a crimson line through the air. Rootless slash. The bird exploded without even making a sound. Yet the roars continued. The two Nine Desolation Fong devils charged together, striking with force enough to crush mountains. Renzu spun in mid-air. The 10,000 flaming swords followed his motion like an infernal vortex, forming a maelstrom of solar light and blood fire. The monsters charged. The swords advanced. The impact was a cataract of light. Kurre, Aok. The first monster had its legs severed before it understood what hit it. Its fangs shattered like ice, and its tail fell severed from its body before touching the ground. The swords pierced, shredded, and exploded parts of the giant until it became a cloud of black flesh that was instantly incinerated. The second monster tried to turn around, tried to flee, but Renzu did not allow it. He pointed two fingers. Stellar Sword, fourth form. All 10,000 swords aligned behind him. Horizon rend. Flash. Light pierced everything. The Nine Desolation Fong devil was cleaved in half. Then into 4. Then into 8. Then into fragments as fine as dust. And every particle burned until nothing remained. Absolute silence fell once more. The swords floated around Renzu like a living sea, crimson and golden flames advancing and receding in waves, reflected in the fragments of darkness still dissolving. Renzu took a deep breath and exhaled calmly. New roars tore through the abyss. This time, dozens, perhaps hundreds. Renzu tilted his head slightly and smiled beneath the mask. This was going to be fun. /N. Did you enjoy the chapter? Then you should know that over on my Patreon you can read up to 20 chapters ahead for just $5. And yes, for that price you also get full access to all of my content. That's right, cheaper than a snack, and with way more drama, action, and guaranteed emotional damage. The link is right below. See you there. My Patreon. Patreon.com/fanficnovels. Thank you so much for your support. You make all of this worthwhile. 65. Chapter 65, Devouring Ancestral Cores. After killing all the ancestral diabolical beasts, the darkness returned to silence once again. Not the threatening silence from before, but a full silence, almost comforting, like the still air of a deep night after a storm. Renzu was sitting cross-legged in the middle of nowhere, his body relaxed, his breathing slow, and his eyes closed. The soft light of the golden and crimson flames had disappeared long ago, leaving only small residual glows that danced like distant fireflies. In the palm of his right hand, several completely black profound cores floated, spinning slowly, like small moons made of liquid ink. The technique of the 10 extreme Daos drew invisible patterns in the air, absorbing the diabolical essence from each core as if drinking water. The energy entered through his pores and rushed through his profound entrances like black rivers, but instead of corrupting him, it was immediately transformed and purified, converting into refined profound energy by his profound veins almost at the same instant it entered his body. If he had known that his cultivation method was capable of absorbing any type of elemental energy, including that contained within profound cores, he would have used it much earlier. Well, at least now he had discovered this ability, and not remained ignorant until the end of his life. Certainly, he would need to study this cultivation method from a higher world better in the future. As was customary, to continue cultivating this method, he needed to choose a new path, since he had completely concluded the path of space. Thus, he opted for the path of water, judging it more convenient for his future plans in the profound sky continent. While absorbing the energy from the profound cores, his consciousness gradually sank into the mysteries of the law of water, enveloping itself in its silent flows and unfathomable depths. And his profound veins transformed slowly. The energy contained in those profound cores, belonging to beasts whose weakest cultivation was still the lowest level of the divine profound realm, was simply immense. By absorbing it, his cultivation began to rise at an accelerated, almost fierce pace, as if each drop of that vast energy pushed his cultivation base like a rocket. Second level of the sovereign profound realm. Third level of the sovereign profound realm. Fourth level of the sovereign profound realm. The energy was hot, heavy, dense, but comfortable, like a lazy summer afternoon. Even though he was sitting in the heart of an abyss that swallowed the light itself, he completely lost track of time. He didn't know if minutes, hours, or entire days had passed in that immobile silence. The flow of energy entering his body was so constant. The profound cores were born and died in the palm of his hand without any interval. A black core shattered into luminous dust, the diabolical essence being devoured by his profound veins as if it were sugar dissolving in hot water, and before even the last grain of that dark light disappeared, another core already appeared between his fingers. Not because he was calling them on purpose, but because the spatial law obeyed him with the same fluidity as a bird obeys the wind. Since he had killed all the ancestral diabolical beasts in that place, they were scattered throughout the subspace. And yet, at the slightest movement of his thought, they converged instantly to his hand. The profound cores appeared as if they had always been there. It was like fishing stars from a dark lake, each one emerging effortlessly, as if called by its true name. The technique of the 10 extreme Daos roared in silence, drinking everything, refining everything, transforming everything. The energy flowed like entire seas of darkness, and his profound veins responded by accepting each enormous torrent as if they were small sips. His cultivation base grew without pause, but still, he felt no discomfort. An entire month passed in the blink of an eye, as if time had decided to take a lazy nap and woken up only when it felt like it. Renzu finally finished cultivating and slowly opened his eyes, blinking slowly, and seeing the abyss around him again. The silence was still there, but now it seemed like an old friend, one of those that doesn't need conversation to fill the air. He stretched his arms above his head, feeling his muscles protest lightly, not from fatigue, but from so much time spent in the same position. A crack came from his neck when he turned his head, and he let out a satisfied sigh, like someone finishing a long nap after a boring day. The last remnants of diabolical energy still danced in the air around him, thin as cigarette smoke, but already dissipating into the nothingness of the subspace. The cores? All absorbed, not a grain left. His palm was empty now, clean as if it had never held anything but air. Renzu stood up slowly, feeling the immensity of profound strength coursing through every fiber of his body. 10th level of the sovereign profound realm. He murmured to himself, a bit surprised. In a single adventure, I crossed from the Emperor Profound Realm to the peak of the Sovereign Profound Realm. Indeed, the best way to advance on the profound path is to seek legacies and opportunities. But my greatest gain came from the absolute mastery of my cultivation method. It absorbed even entire profound cores. He furrowed his brows slightly upon realizing something. In fact, I think I've discovered a future problem. My profound veins seem to demand too much to cross each cultivation level. If it were someone else in my place with the same opportunities, they would have already reached the divine tribulation realm, or, at minimum, the divine soul realm. The first levels of the profound path were elemental profound realm, nascent profound realm, true profound realm, spirit profound realm, earth profound realm, sky profound realm, emperor profound realm, Tyrant Profound Realm, and finally, Sovereign Profound Realm. These 9 realms formed what was widely known as the 9 mortal realms. Although they were classified as 9 different stages, they could also be seen as parts of a single vast domain, a great unified realm. Only by surpassing this great set of levels does one truly break the limits of the mortal world, then passing into a completely different domain, known to all as the Divine Profound Realm. The Divine Profound Realm is the name of a great realm. Profound practitioners who enter this realm have formally transcended mortality and entered the divine path. Compared to the 9 mortal realms, the Divine Profound Realm is composed of 7 great realms, called the 7 Divine Profound Realms. Besides 3 special realms, the 7 Divine Profound Realms are no different from the 9 mortal realms. Each realm is once again divided into 10 small realms. The first realm is the Divine Origin Realm, which allows one's life energy to become divine. This realm is the first step to entering the divine path. When you enter the Divine Origin Realm, a qualitative change will occur with your life energy. After entering the divine path, profound energy will once again temper your body, allowing you to separate from your mortal flesh and have a longer lifespan. This will give you even more tenacious vitality and an even more inexplicable body. The second realm is the Divine Soul Realm, which allows one's soul to become divine. It is in this realm where a profound practitioner's soul undergoes a transformation. Achieving the Divine Soul Realm will make your soul transcend the ordinary. You will possess even stronger willpower and mental strength. Your understanding of profound arts and the laws of the world will surpass your own self. The third realm is relatively special. It is called the Divine Tribulation Realm. In this realm, only profound energy will experience an increase in growth, and no other change accompanies it. However, the word tribulation here is the nightmare of countless profound practitioners. The Divine Tribulation represents the most dangerous and decisive moment for any cultivator seeking to break mortal limits and tread the path toward divinity. When a practitioner reaches the peak of the 10th level of the Divine Tribulation Realm and attempts to advance to the next great realm, they inevitably awaken the wrath of the heavens. This celestial judgment manifests in the form of the Divine Tribulation Lightning, a punishment that separates those who are worthy from those who dare to aspire to what is beyond the human. The Tribulation Lightning is feared for its incomparable strength. Only those capable of withstanding its attacks can cross successfully. Those who fail have varying fates, ranging from permanent damage to immediate death. The intensity of this tribulation varies according to the cultivator's innate talent. The lower the talent, the weaker the lightning, the greater the aptitude, the fiercer the celestial punishment. For the vast majority of profound practitioners, only a single tribulation lightning bolt appears, and even then, 60% perish during the advancement. However, those endowed with true talent face more severe tribulations. High-potential cultivators must endure 2 stages of the tribulation, while even rarer geniuses may be subjected to 3 full stages. Above them exist the almost mythical prodigies, emerging perhaps once every century in the divine region, capable of attracting 4 full stages of tribulation lightning. The concept of stages is deceptive in its apparent simplicity. The structure of a tribulation follows a rigorously ascending pattern. In the first stage, there is only 1 lightning attack. In the second, 2 in the third, for consecutive attacks, and in the fourth stage, 8 simultaneous lightning attacks. In total, the cultivator capable of attracting the 4 stages must endure 15 successive attacks, without interval for rest, without time to recover breath. Each strike carries power sufficient to destroy most aspirants right in the first discharge. The most accepted explanation for such severity is the ancient maxim that the heavens are jealous of the talented. The greater someone's potential on the divine path, the more the celestial forces seek to bar their advancement. For surpassing the mortal limit and walking toward divinity is, in itself, an act that defies the heavens themselves. Despite the brutality of this process, there are notable precedents. In the vast primal chaos with quadrillions of profound practitioners, there have been various individuals who successfully endured 3, and even the 4 full stages of the tribulation. Those who survive such an extraordinary feat inevitably reach supreme heights, becoming famous throughout the God realm. From what he remembers of the original history, throughout the history of the God realm, the extraordinary existence of an individual who faced 6 full stages of the tribulation lightning was recorded. A feat so unbelievable that it became legendary. According to the records, the logic of the stages follows an implacable progression. In the first stage there is 1 attack, in the second 2, in the third 4, in the fourth 8, in the fifth 16, and in the 6th stage the cultivator must endure 32 simultaneous strikes of divine lightning. The magnitude of this challenge clearly describes the absurd level of talent needed to summon such a celestial judgment. This singular cultivator was born in one of the upper star realms. On the day his tribulation descended, the entire God realm was taken by shock and awe at the unimaginable intensity of the divine punishment. Despite his strength, he ended up succumbing before completing the last stage. Still, the simple fact of having survived until the end of the 5th stage, even on the brink of death, was enough for his name to be inscribed in history. However, reality was cruel. withstanding 32 tribulation lightning strikes, even for someone in perfect condition within the divine tribulation realm, was something practically impossible. Due to the large number of deaths when attempting this ascension, the divine tribulation realm gained another name among profound practitioners: divine suffering realm. It was known as the realm where many perished, not just ordinary failures, but also exceptional talents whose brilliant lives were extinguished under the judgment of the heavens. Crossing this realm required inevitably facing the divine celestial tribulation lightning. However, preserving one's own life is the most basic instinct of any being. Therefore, countless cultivators, including renowned geniuses, choose to remain indefinitely at the peak of the divine tribulation realm, abdicating advancement and preferring safety to almost certain death. The greater the talent, the more intense the tribulation and, consequently, the greater the probability of destruction. This is the reason why, after the divine tribulation realm, there is a drastic decrease in the number of profound practitioners. Few dare to challenge the heavens beyond this point, even fewer survive. Successfully enduring the divine celestial tribulation lightning, traversing the divine tribulation realm, and reaching the fourth realm, the divine spirit realm. In this domain, spiritual senses change greatly. Upon entering the divine spirit realm, the world becomes completely different. All senses of auras, elements, and laws undergo major changes. Many profound arts that previously could not be understood and learned are easily overcome in this domain. After making one's life energy, soul, and spiritual sense divine, it is time to completely transcend the human domain. After the divine spirit realm is a realm that is even considered one of the upper realms, the divine king realm. Above the divine king realm is the divine sovereign realm. Becoming a divine sovereign means that one has become a sovereign of the masses within the God realm. One could fly freely to the starry skies and look down on the world. Above the divine sovereign realm is the divine master realm. Divine master means a master of the divine path. This would be at the pinnacle of the God realm. In the current primal chaos dimension, it is the highest level and is the realm closest to the true God that a human can achieve. In the divine master realm, there is almost nothing impossible to do, and each divine master is an existence that cannot be offended. He shook his head slowly, like someone awakening from a boring daydream, and took a step forward into the abyss of darkness. Well, there's no point in complaining. At least now I know what to expect. Renzu scratched his chin covered by the dark mask, his eyes wandering through the void without focus, while his thoughts organized themselves like leaves falling slowly on an autumn afternoon. Advancing in the divine profound path was, honestly, a cruel joke from the heavens, or so he believed. It wasn't just gathering energy and moving forward. Each level of the sovereign profound realm was like climbing a mountain that doubled in size with every step. But breaking through to the divine origin realm? That required something beyond difficult. It was like trying to fill an entire ocean, a volume of power so absurd that it made the 9 mortal realms seem like just a shallow puddle. This was the fate of those who tread the profound path. The further one advanced, the more resources they needed to consume, or else they would seek environments where the energy of heaven and earth was denser. However, in his case, the challenge was even greater. The amount of energy required was 1,000 times greater than that of an ordinary practitioner. The only compensation was equally inhuman. His profound energy was also 1,000 times greater, as if it were an eternal burden balanced by an equally monstrous profound strength. He had swallowed cores that could catapult an ordinary genius straight to the divine soul realm, perhaps even to the divine tribulation realm. That sea of diabolical energy should break barriers that would take centuries for a genius to overcome. But there he was, still stuck at the peak of the sovereign profound realm, as if his profound veins were black holes, devouring everything without advancing a single step beyond. Still, despite being a problem for the future, he had a clear feeling that the technique of the 10 extreme Daos offered a more than viable solution. He just needed to study more about its mysteries. At least now I control water as if it were an extension of my arm. The understanding of the law of water is also complete. He murmured calmly, flexing his fingers, and a drop of water formed in the air, spinning lazily before evaporating. The law of water, the law of fire, the law of wind, the law of lightning, the law of earth. These were the 5 most basic elemental laws of the primal chaos. Now that he had completed the absolute understanding of the law of water, he needed to decide his next step. After some time reflecting, he chose to follow the path of wind, aiming to completely master the law of wind. Still, he intended to also achieve the law of earth before attempting to advance to the divine profound realm. But for that, he would have to delay his advancement as much as possible. In any case, his profound strength was already at the peak allowed by that world. Therefore, he planned to focus on his body cultivation and open 3 more gates of the 8 inner gates. Setting these thoughts aside, he decided to leave the subspace and continue his journey through the Azure Cloud continent. /N. Did you enjoy the chapter? Then you should know that over on my Patreon you can read up to 20 chapters ahead for just $5. And yes, for that price you also get full access to all of my content. That's right, cheaper than a snack, and with way more drama, action, and guaranteed emotional damage. The link is right below. See you there. My Patreon. Patreon.com/fanficnovels. Thank you so much for your support. You make all of this worthwhile. 66. Chapter 66, The First Villainous Act. In an instant, the dark abyss vanished, and Rinzu emerged, floating gently above the clouds, enveloped by a clean, fresh breeze so pure it seemed to sing along the edges of the world. The vast blue stretched as far as the eye could reach, and the sun touched his figure, highlighting its perfect contours. He had changed his clothes. His robes flowed around his body like layers of refined mist, woven in shades that shifted between pure white and a nearly silvery gray, with subtle details reminiscent of brushstrokes carefully applied by a patient artist. The fabric fell in long, harmonious lines, embracing his perfect silhouette without ever constraining it, as though the garments themselves were a natural extension of him, light, soft, yet majestic. The wide sleeves moved with the wind, and the dark belt marked his waist in an elegant contrast that only made his presence more imposing. There, in the midst of the open sky, he seemed less like a man, and more like an immortal who had descended from the heavens to the mortal world. Due to the enormous amount of diabolical energy from the darkness he had absorbed, his black hair had changed as well, growing even darker, deeper than shadow itself. It was long, lush, cascading down to the small of his back like a liquid waterfall of pure night. Each strand seemed alive, gliding with the breeze so smoothly and silkily that it resembled water flowing in slow motion. It formed a perfect contrast with the light surrounding his body. The sun illuminated the darkness of those strands and, rather than extinguishing it, made each lock shimmer with a delicate, almost hypnotic gleam. His eyes had undergone a transformation as well. They remained completely black. Not an ordinary black, but an absolute absence of any color. Deep, silent, infinite, like an eternal night in which no star had ever been born. They were so intense that anyone who dared stare into them for too long would feel the world itself tremble for a brief moment. Yet they were beautiful, painfully beautiful, so exquisite that they would leave any mortal breathless, unable to look away. His face was concealed by the white mask he had donned in place of the dark one to match his new attire. It covered the lower half up to his nose. Simple, smooth, flawless. Yet, paradoxically, it made him even more fascinating. That erased half only rendered the exposed part more seductive, more perfect, like a masterpiece deliberately left incomplete just to torment the eyes of anyone who beheld it. His silhouette was harmonious in every detail. Tall, elegant, perfectly proportioned, with a presence that blended softness and danger in equal measure. He looked like an immortal painting brought to life, with lines so flawless they defied realism. There was no flaw. There were no excesses. It was a silent grace that dominated the sky effortlessly. Rinzu lingered there for a few moments, allowing the wind to envelop his robes and play with his hair. He gazed down at the world below while extending his senses across the entire azure cloud continent, using his mastery over spatial laws. Essentially, he merged his consciousness with space itself, expanding his perception to the point where he could effortlessly see and feel everything within the continent. Nothing could hide every movement, every shift in energy. Every life was a lit spark before his senses. A simple trick, but extremely useful, especially considering his vast knowledge of rare herbs and medicinal items. In less than an instant, he located every common, rare, and profoundly rare herb scattered across the continent. Every ancestral root, every leaf hidden beneath layers of earth, every plant no one even imagined existed, all shone in his perception like tiny beacons. With a single thought, his hand became enveloped in the profound art of the heavenly will crystal body. Immediately afterward, countless herbs were uprooted from their places without so much as swaying, teleported through his control of space and gently deposited inside his spatial ring. Naturally, he left a seedling in place of every plant he harvested. He had no intention of exterminating the continent's resources. In a few years, everything would regrow. Yet even while being considerate, the damage was inevitable. He had essentially stolen resources that would have sustained entire generations of profound practitioners. Many of them would fall into decline in the coming years without ever understanding why. However, since he was openly committing his first villainous act, he decided to go all the way. Without hesitation, he plundered all the treasures of the three strongest sects in the Azure Cloud continent: the Heavenly Frustration Sect, the Divine Seven Stars Palace, and the Ascending Heavenly Sword Sect. The resource vaults, protected by ancient formations and complex barriers, opened before him as if they were mere empty boxes. Every treasure vanished in the blink of an eye, torn from space and sent directly into his spatial ring. In a short time, The accumulated volume became so absurd that he had to expand the ring itself through his dominion over space just to accommodate the veritable mountain of riches he was amassing. He acquired countless profound weapons, a sea of rare and profoundly rare herbs, exotic items with specific effects, and, most valuable of all, practically the entire libraries of profound arts from the three sects. Ancient scrolls, forbidden manuscripts, incomplete techniques, lost arts, everything now belonged to him. Renzu looked at the heavy ring on his hand and let out a calm, almost lazy smile. For a first villainous act, I think I did pretty well. Having finished that, he searched for the last thing he wanted in this place. It didn't take long to find it. His black eyes narrowed with a slow, almost lazy glint, yet laden with intent. He tilted his face slightly eastward. The breeze moved his hair like a veil of living night. At last, I found you. In the next instant, his figure vanished like a ghost, dissolving into the air without leaving a single trace. There was no displacement of energy, no visible ripple in space. Just a sudden absence, as if the world had swallowed him and spat him back out somewhere else. He reappeared in the blink of an eye, floating several dozen meters above a simple cabin nestled among jagged mountains. The place was humble. Weathered wood, a thatched roof, a small herb garden beside it. Around it, snow-capped peaks and dense forests whispered beneath the cold wind. A narrow trail wound downward to a nearby village where lanterns flickered like tiny stars settled on the ground. By looking through space, and ignoring the cabin's wooden walls in this way, he could see what was happening inside. An ageless-looking elder leaned over a child lying on a makeshift bed. The exhausted peasant parents, their faces etched with worry, watched with bated breath. They had walked from the village carrying their feverish daughter in their arms, seeking the only miracle capable of saving her, the touch of the legendary medicine saint. The air inside was thick with the scent of boiling herbs from a cauldron. The soft light filtering through the small windows rested upon the elder like an ethereal halo, making his presence even more imposing. That man was Yun-gu, the medicine saint. His long white beard fell like a cascade of freshly fallen snow, swaying lightly as he applied an herbal paste to the child's forehead. His thick, arched white eyebrows framed eyes as clear as spring water, deep, compassionate, filled with a serenity that seemed to operate beyond the mortal world. His white hair flowed down to the middle of his back, immaculate and silky, every strand perfectly in place. But what impressed most was his face. Smooth, without a single wrinkle, as though time itself had bowed before him. His presence was gentle yet extraordinary, that of a celestial sage who had descended from the clouds solely to ease the suffering of others. He wore simple robes of a nearly translucent light blue, and his movements were precise and tender. Every gesture carried the grace of a silent blessing. Decades earlier, Yun-gu had stumbled upon a medical scroll in forgotten ruins, deep in the mountains. That scroll had guided his entire life. Even understanding only 30% of its contents, he had become a medical genius capable of defying the heavens. Curing incurable diseases, prolonging lives on the brink of death, manipulating vital energies with a mastery bordering on the divine. He had named the scroll the Heavenly Medicine Manual. In another timeline, in another life, he would teach it to Yun-che, polishing the young man until he became his successor. In other words, Yun-gu was the master of the one many scornfully called Scum-che. One thing, however, truly astonished him. Yun-gu's presence was so clean, so pure, so absurdly benevolent that it radiated like a white flame amid darkness. It was a kindness that no longer seemed human. Tranquil, profound, unshakable, as if he had truly understood the path of a physician and possessed infinite compassion to heal all people. And it was precisely that purity that left him stunned. How could a man like this have raised a walking disaster like Scum-che? The mere memory of that individual's actions made Renzu frown. In his original timeline, Yun-che had massacred an entire clan, justified rape with excuses as absurd as they were convenient, pursued women relentlessly as if they were trophies, jumped from relationship to relationship without ever being satisfied, and instead of training, honoring any of the teachings he received, or the trillions of legacies he possessed, spent most of his time chasing skirts. It would almost be comical if it weren't tragic. Yun-gu's kindness and his future disciple's character were so utterly opposed they seemed to exist in different universes. Renzu let out a soft sigh. How could someone like that have been taught by you? He murmured, still intrigued. Even without knowing the man personally, though the descriptions from the original story in his mind served as a foundation, he could tell with a single glance that this man possessed genuine kindness, a heart without stains. In any case, that hardly mattered at the moment. Through his expanded spatial sense, Renzu saw what had truly brought him here. The other half of the sky-poisoned pearl. Renzu crossed his arms while floating above the cabin, the soft light reflecting off the white mask covering his face. The surrounding snow returned that glow in an almost ethereal manner, as though he were a presence alien to the mortal world. His black eyes gleamed with lazy, calculated, dangerous interest. "What should I do with you?" he murmured, more to the void than to himself. "My plans for Scumche could all go down the drain if someone like you exists, someone with medical knowledge on such a profound level. Should I simply kill you?" He tilted his head in a relaxed, almost casual manner, as if deciding between tea or coffee on a cold morning. Nothing in his posture suggested urgency. Nothing about him seemed burdened by guilt. Killing would be the simplest. He continued, his voice low and velvety, barely passing through the mask. "And I'm technically in the right role for it, since I've decided to accept that I'm the villain of this story. Consequences shouldn't matter." A soft sigh escaped, forming a small white cloud in the frigid air. "But killing a gentle man like you goes against what I believe." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Regardless of the beast your disciple became, you bear no blame. Everything you do in this world is heal, save, and help people. Besides, considering you possess some knowledge of the miracle of life, we could almost be considered half-brother disciples." He lowered his gaze, silent. Down below, Yungu worked. The old man inserted silver needles into the child with absolute precision, each point touched by a drop of vital energy, so pure it resembled liquid light flowing across the skin. The girl's fever visibly subsided. Her breathing, previously labored and painful, became as light as leaves rustling in the wind. In a few minutes, she would be running through the village again, laughing as if nothing had happened. Renzu watched the scene in silence. Kill him or not? Eternal Sword Main Peak, ascending heavenly sword sect. The sun was beginning to set on the horizon, painting the mountains in soft gold. The Eternal Sword Peak, always imposing and majestic, seemed even quieter than usual, as though it were breathing in unison with the wind weaving through the ancient pines. That silence, however, was abruptly shattered. "The herbs! All the herbs have disappeared." The shout from the 10,000 Herbs Pavilion echoed across the entire peak like the roar of a wounded tiger. Moments later, Li Feng, an inner disciple renowned for his composure and dedication, stumbled out of the pavilion with a face as pale as the eternal snow crowning the neighboring mountain. Sweat poured down his forehead, and his hands trembled so violently that his identity plaque slipped from his fingers and clattered weakly onto the ground. Behind him, inside the pavilion, reigned a terrifying emptiness. The shelves that once held botanical treasures of incalculable value were now as clean as the sky after a storm. Not a single fallen petal, not a speck of spiritual dust. Shock swept through the peak in seconds. Disciples rushed about like ants after their anthill had been destroyed. Then another voice exploded into the air. "The profound weapons. All the profound weapons are gone. Even the heaven-breaking sword. Even our ancestral sword. Everything." It was Zhao Tianba, 8th on the inner ranking. A man who faced profound beasts without flinching, yet who now shook like a cornered rabbit. Nothing remained in the 9 swords arsenal. Not even the common blades of the outer disciples had been spared. By this point, every elder present on Eternal Sword Peak was heading toward the central square, bewildered, stunned, some openly terrified. But the worst was still to come. A third figure limped toward the central square, an elder in gray robes, his white hair disheveled as though he had just awoken from a nightmare. He was the guardian of the Forbidden Library and the Heavenly Treasure Vault, a man who rarely displayed emotion. Now, however, his eyes were red and brimming with tears. He collapsed to his knees before the sect leader's palace, his body nearly crumpling. Sect leader! Sect leader! The Forbidden Library. The profound art scrolls. The manuals left by our ancestors. The forbidden techniques. Everything. Everything is gone. His voice broke as it trembled. A suffocating silence enveloped the sect. Thousands of disciples. Hundreds of elders. All frozen. Breath caught in nervous throats. Then chaos erupted like a volcano. Who did this? How is it possible? The defensive formations are intact. Not even a ripple of profound energy. This is impossible. An external enemy? A traitor? Amid the pandemonium, a vast and domineering aura tore through the sky. The air itself seemed to bow, and even the clouds trembled. Mu Yingchan, the sect leader, a man whose mere presence was like a blade slicing through the firmament, appeared before them. His long, sharp eyebrows resembled twin swords, and his piercing gaze could shred the soul of a dishonest disciple. Silence! His voice crashed down like thunder, and the world stopped. With a wave of his hand, he summoned the recordings from the surveillance formations. Transparent projections manifested in the sky, displaying the last 24 hours of the sect. Nothing, nothing, and more nothing. No shadow, no intruder, no abnormal flow of energy. No change in the wind, the earth, the sky, the light. It was as though the entire theft had occurred between one blink and the next. Mu Wing-chan's face turned deathly pale. His voice, though low, carried a fury capable of overturning mountains. Someone infiltrated our sect, opened every ancestral formation, and stole every herb, every weapon, every scroll, every treasure, without leaving a single trace of their presence. His fists clenched, profound power surging in violent waves. Search. Scour every corner, every stone, every leaf. The entire world will rise to hunt this thief. Yet while the ascending heavenly sword sect plunged into absolute despair, the same horrifying scene unfolded elsewhere. In the heavenly frustration sect, the patriarch roared in madness upon discovering that the one sovereign pill capable of saving his son had vanished, along with everything else in their treasury. In the divine Seven Stars Palace, Zhuhanshua wept tears of blood. The ancestral star diagram, the most precious relic of his bloodline, was gone, along with all the profound cores accumulated over 10 generations. In less than half a day, the three most powerful sects of the Azure Cloud continent had been reduced to empty shells, their power, their legacy, and their dignity torn away like leaves in the wind. And the most terrifying part, no one, anywhere on the continent, had even the faintest shadow of a clue. /N. Did you enjoy the chapter? Then you should know that over on my Patreon you can read up to 20 chapters ahead for just $5. And yes, for that price you also get full access to all of my content. That's right, cheaper than a snack, and with way more drama, action, and guaranteed emotional damage. The link is right below. See you there. My Patreon. Patreon.com/fanficnovels. Thank you so much for your support. You make all of this worthwhile. 67. Chapter 67. All objectives completed. Renzu raised his hand slowly, not out of hesitation, but out of pure disinterest. The cold wind dragged a strand of his black hair, making it ripple like liquid ink against the sky's light. I'm worrying too much. The phrase came out almost like a lazy sigh, light, calm, without any moral weight. His black eyes remained fixed on the cabin below, but there was no longer any tension in them, just certainty. Even if this old man is a medical genius, how much can he understand? Renzu tilted his head, his gaze slightly sharpened, yet relaxed. It's hard to believe that someone with his talent could surpass my own knowledge and talent. I mastered the entire miracle of life in a short time, while he took decades of study to understand just a part. He waved his hand in the air, a gentle, almost artistic gesture, as if brushing away an invisible concern. I don't need to kill him. It was the final decision. Still, his eyes narrowed, tinged with a cold gleam. But precaution is never too much. With the plot armor that Scumche carries, any detail could turn into a disaster. And this old man. His gaze slid to Yungu, who was still treating the child with infinite patience. He is the only one in this world capable of healing him, should my plans unfold as they should. Better to prevent than to regret later. The profound energy within his body responded immediately, flowing with absolute naturalness. It was warm and silent, but it carried an authority that seemed to bend the very space around him. The palm of his hand began to glow with a deep and intense gold, intertwined with crimson sparks. First came the sound, a dull, muffled thud. Then the light took shape. The profound energy condensed so quickly that the surrounding air rippled, distorted like a vibrating water mirror. He didn't move a muscle, but thousands, millions of tiny traces began to emerge between his fingers, lines so fine they seemed drawn by a divine brush. These lines connected to each other, forming impossible patterns, a geometry that did not obey the normal laws of the world. He was creating a profound formation. Since gaining access to the vast libraries of the illusory demon realm, his knowledge had expanded like an ocean without shores. Among all the fields he had studied, the one in which he had evolved in a truly absurd way was formations. Combining his refined control of profound energy, his natural understanding of the world's laws, and a genius that bordered on the incomprehensible, he advanced in this study as if he were merely breathing. What for others required decades, for him was no more than a casual exercise. Now, looking honestly at himself in terms of formations, he was already at the level of a master, perhaps even above that. There was no formation he couldn't dismantle, improve, or recreate in his own way. And that's what he did, using everything he knew. Before his palm, floating like a fragment of a hidden universe, a triangular profound formation appeared. It was small, the size of a thumbnail. Each line that composed it carried infinitely delicate traces, micro-inscriptions carved with such absurd precision that only someone as capable as he could have created them. There were millions of symbols, each representing a branch of medicine, from the most primitive to the highest spiritual concept. It was as if Renzu had compressed the entire meaning of the word cure into that triangle. But that was just the essential part of the profound formation. It had no consciousness or knowledge of its own, it was merely a mechanism, a mute construct capable of detecting any bodily movement that indicated someone's intention to perform a cure. This essential part remained at the center of the profound formation, while at one of the triangle's points, a golden flame ignited, with the power of the golden crow flames, hot, relentless, destructive. Soon after, a crimson flame, soft and divine, shone at the second point. The vermilion bird flames had appeared, and the third point was made with an indescribable mechanism. Then, the profound formation was suddenly covered by special laws. A small, circular space took shape, incomprehensible, undetectable. A spatial fragment carved by Renzu that simply could not be perceived by anyone, not even by the supreme beings of the primordial chaos. That was where the formation hid. Renzu observed his creation for a moment, the golden light reflecting on the white mask and the dark strands of his hair. A calm, almost lazy expression crossed his face. Yes, this is good. He extended his hand, and the formation sank into space itself, disappearing as if it had never existed, entering Yun-Gu's body silently. This profound formation, which he called Yin-Yang Destiny Profound Formation, had only one effect. If Yun-Gu approached Scum-Che with the intention of treating him, if any medicinal energy was detected, if any attempt at healing was made, even the slightest, the fused flames would explode instantly, burning both body and soul until only invisible ashes remained, carried away by the wind. All that was left was, later, to place a mark on Yun-Che, ensuring that the profound formation would only activate when Yun-Gu approached him. And if someone, by some miracle, removed the formation, he would know. Although he doubted anyone was capable of that, there was still the possibility of the destiny that protected Scum-Che, the so-called ancestral goddess, intervening directly to undo something created by him. And the simple act of undoing would trigger the mark within the circular space, sending a direct warning to his spiritual sense. Renzu sighed softly. Better safe than sorry. He raised his hand in a simple, almost nonchalant gesture. The space around him vibrated. A silent, elegant, obedient wave. An object appeared instantly before him, as if the world had been rewritten to place it there. The Celestial Medicine Manual. The same one that Yun-Gu carried as his greatest treasure. Renzu didn't even blink. A small golden spark ignited at the tip of his finger, a fragment of the golden crow flames, insignificant enough to seem casual, but powerful enough to erase mountains from existence. He touched the manual with lazy lightness. The book didn't burn. It ceased to exist. It turned into dust that dissolved in the wind, like stardust being carried away, without leaving even ashes. Renzu didn't spare a second glance at what remained. This eliminates another irritating variable. With another wave, another object was brought from Yun-Gu's body straight to his hand without the old man noticing. The half of the sky poison pearl. It appeared with a deep green glow, a perfect sphere, the exact size to rest in a human palm. The surface was so smooth it seemed made of living jade, exuding a faint invisible poison. Or rather, it would exude, if he hadn't sealed its lethal power in the same instant he took it from the old man. Now it was just a silent object, perfectly harmless. But it was the other half of one of the 7 heavenly profound treasures. The sky poison pearl, that fused with Scum-Che, had strong purification and refinement abilities, but it lacked poisonous powers. However, the poisonous powers were the main powers of the sky poison pearl, and they were precisely the powers of the one he had just taken from Yun-Gu. It possessed pure poison powers, according to what he knew about this extraordinary and very forced event. In another timeline, on the Azure Cloud continent, when Yun-Gu gave the sky poison pearl to Yun-Che, he warned him never to release the vicious poison inside the sky poison pearl. After Yun-Gu died, Yun-Che lost his mind and furiously released the sky poison that Yun-Gu had tirelessly sealed, exterminating countless people and clans with the poison. The last time he released the poison, he completely consumed all the poison powers inside the sky poison pearl, and even the poison origin had been released at the same time after the release of the last piece of sky poison. Originally, when the poison origin recovered, it would return to the sky poison pearl on its own. There was even a time incompatibility. Although the poisonous origin that remained on the Azure Cloud continent did not disappear due to the powers of the Mirror of Samsara, after recovering, it could not return to the sky poison pearl, and formed its own body, producing the second sky poison pearl, which was precisely the one in his hands at that moment. Renzu twirled it between his fingers, as if it were just a pretty stone he had found by chance. He wasn't even paying much attention, until the sky poison pearl trembled. Very subtly, as if it had awakened. The green glow on its surface expanded, shining, and then the entire sphere melted like liquid light, escaping from his fingers, transforming into an emerald trail that ran up his hand like a serpent of energy. Renzu widened his eyes slightly. Without any warning, that half of the sky poison pearl fused into his right palm calmly. The green light circled his hand like a ring of liquid green fire, and then etched itself into his skin. When the light ceased, what remained was a sharp, delicate green circular mark, like a divine seal imprinted directly on his flesh. Pulsed once. Then it silenced. Renzu remained still. The wind blew his hair to the side. He looked at his hand with a strange expression, a mix of genuine curiosity and slight pondering. How is this possible? If I'm not mistaken, the mirror of samsara forced the sky poison pearl to recognize Scum-Che as its master. For someone like him who was rarely surprised, the feeling was unusual. The green mark glowed softly again, almost as if responding to him, as if it had found its rightful owner. Renzu furrowed a brow. It was then that he realized a certain familiar pattern of profound energy circulation had attracted and subdued the sky poison pearl, something he hadn't even noticed until that moment, precisely because it was the same circulation that flowed continuously through his entire body due to the 10 extreme Daos technique. So, this happened thanks to his own cultivation method? An innate ability to attract and subdue any treasure? It made sense. That technique was founded on the Tao, the supreme driving force of the universe. All paths, all laws and understandings, inevitably converged to that primordial force. And if the Tao was the basis of everything, then everything within the heavens and earth existed within its domain. Therefore, it was natural that he could subdue, refine, and assimilate anything. Right? This conclusion gained even more strength when remembering that he had been able to absorb profound cores, the evil god's seeds, and even the ancestral spatial symbol. Renzu observed the green mark on his right palm for a few more moments, then slowly curved his lips into a lazy, almost satisfied smile. Interesting. The voice came out low, laced with genuine amusement. The wind blew stronger, making his white robes ripple like water, and his black hair dance like a curtain of living night. 10 extreme Daos. It really has no limits, does it? He closed his hand. The green mark glowed one last time, as if responding to its new owner's call, and then quieted completely, fusing into the skin as if it had always belonged there. He had absolute control over that half of the sky poison pearl. And with that, his journey on the azure cloud continent ended. With an almost lazy gesture, he tore the space in front of him with 2 fingers. A black and perfect rift opened, silent, without any fluctuation of profound energy. On the other side, one could glimpse a sky similar to the current one. It was the profound sky continent. It was time to continue his adventure. Then, without further ceremony, he stepped through the spatial rift. The tear closed behind him with a soft sound, like a page being turned. The azure cloud continent was left behind, now a poorer place that would be swallowed by countless difficulties in the near future. But no one knew that at that moment. /N. Did you enjoy the chapter? Then you should know that over on my Patreon you can read up to 20 chapters ahead for just $5. And yes, for that price you also get full access to all of my content. That's right. Cheaper than a snack, and with way more drama, action, and guaranteed emotional damage. The link is right below. See you there. My Patreon. Patreon.com/fanficnovels. Thank you so much for your support. You make all of this worthwhile. 68. Chapter 68. Finally, the profound sky continent. The profound sky continent is one of the 3 great continents of this world. It houses 7 main nations, among which the Divine Phoenix Empire stands out as the largest and most powerful. However, above these 7 nations exist the so-called 4 great sacred grounds. Each of them is more powerful than any nation individually, and together, they are the true rulers of the continent. Although the power of the sacred grounds is relatively balanced among themselves, all of them overwhelmingly surpass even the Divine Phoenix Empire. Their stated objective is to protect the profound sky continent and prevent invasions from foreign forces. These great sects dedicate themselves to cultivating the profound way and, in principle, avoid interfering in each other's affairs or in the internal disputes of the mortal nations. The 4 great sacred grounds are known as the Mighty Heavenly Sword Region, the Sun-Moon Divine Hall, the Supreme Ocean Palace, and the Absolute Monarch Sanctuary. The Supreme Ocean Palace is located approximately 1,500 kilometers south of the southern extremity of the profound sky continent, above the Southern Ocean, which is the origin of its name. Among the so-called 4 sacred grounds, all recognized as guardians of the profound sky continent for tens of thousands of years, only the Supreme Ocean Palace has, in fact, maintained its guardian mission in a continuous and absolute manner. The reason for this uninterrupted permanence over the ocean is directly linked to the so-called Moonslaughter Devil Nest. Despite the extreme location, the constant oceanic disasters, and the countless daily difficulties, the Supreme Ocean Palace has never moved to solid land throughout its millennial existence. The sole reason for this has always been the need to watch over and contain the nest. The Moonslaughter Devil Nest appeared more than 10,000 years ago, when 7 ancestors of the Supreme Ocean Palace were exploring the Southern Ocean. During the expedition, they encountered a vast maritime region completely tinted black, filled with countless corpses of oceanic beasts equally blackened. In the center of this deadly region, they discovered an island equally covered by that somber coloration. The island released an extremely dense energy, being the source of the death throughout that vast maritime region. Upon investigating the island, the ancestors located an enormous cave, from which this dark energy originated. The deeper they advanced, the more intense the energy became, to the point of drastically suppressing the profound strength of the explorers. In the deepest points of the cave, they found a terrifying, profound beast of darkness. This beast called itself the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign. It was an entity that hated light and demonstrated particular repulsion toward moonlight. Very little was known about its true origin. Its apparent strength was at the initial stage of the Tyrant Profound Realm. Although the 7 ancestors were all experts in the late stage of the Sovereign Profound Realm, inside the cave their strength was suppressed to the Emperor Profound Realm, making them unable to resist the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign. As a result, only one of the 7 managed to escape. The other 6 lost their lives inside the nest. After the escape of the sole survivor, the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign did not pursue him, as it feared both daylight and the shine of the moon. It was presumed that it would never leave its nest. However, the dark energy released from that place was infinite. During the retreat, the survivor personally heard the creature's roar, which announced that the day it emerged would be the day the entire world would be submerged in darkness. Fearing that the energy would spread until it reached the profound sky continent, the surviving ancestor gathered all the experts of the Ocean Palace. Without hesitation, they sacrificed more than a dozen of the sect's most powerful profound artifacts, along with an enormous quantity of purple-veined divine crystals, to build a gigantic isolation barrier. This barrier completely sealed the Moonslaughter Devil Nest, blocking the continuous leakage of the dark energy. Since maintaining the barrier requires a monstrous consumption of energy, at least a dozen monarchs must inject profound energy every 3 years to sustain it. For this reason, the ancestor decided to move the entire sect over the Southern Ocean and officially rename it the Supreme Ocean Palace, establishing its eternal function as guardian of that seal. Although there was a flaw in the barrier, access to the Moonslaughter Devil Nest can only occur once every 500 years. The place was discovered about 1,300 years ago and, since then, remains exactly where it was found. The existence of this limitation indicates that the barrier sealing it was left deliberately, allowing controlled entries at regular intervals. The ancestor of the Supreme Ocean Palace supposed that the dark energy originated directly from the body of the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign itself. According to this supposition, no matter how powerful a profound beast might be, it would inevitably reach the end of its life. When that occurred, the dark energy of the nest would naturally dissipate, ending the Guardian mission. At that moment, the Supreme Ocean Palace could finally leave the Southern Ocean. To confirm with precision whether the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign was alive or dead, the ancestor deliberately left a small gap in the barrier, programmed to open only every 500 years. To prevent massive leakage of the energy, the opening time was rigidly limited to just 100 breaths. Every interval of 500 years, the Supreme Ocean Palace sent disciples of lower aptitude to enter the nest and verify the creature's condition. Since 6,500 years ago, all the disciples sent have returned alive, confirming that the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign is already dead. Despite this, the Supreme Ocean Palace continued to maintain constant vigilance over the place. This revealed an even more alarming reality. Even with the death of the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign, the dark energy continued to spread. Thus, it was concluded that this energy, in fact, did not originate from the creature, but from an unknown source even deeper and more terrifying. If the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign had left the nest while still alive, it would be nothing more than a tyrant profound beast, dangerous but far from being the true threat. The true terror has always been the infinite source of the dark energy. For this reason, the Supreme Ocean Palace had no choice but to continue guarding the region and reinforcing the barrier every 3 years, maintaining this uninterrupted vigilance for 10,000 years. In the several thousand years that followed the definitive confirmation of the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign's death, the Supreme Ocean Palace continued to send people to the nest every 500 years, as a preventive measure against possible incidents. At first, only disciples of inferior aptitude performed the entry. However, after repeated confirmations, this pattern changed. Elders and even the Sovereign of the Seas began to participate in the expeditions. Even so, the dark energy inside the nest remained dense and overwhelming. Even being practitioners of extraordinary strength, none of them could remain inside for more than a few dozen breaths before being forced to retreat immediately and reseal the barrier. At that moment, The Supreme Ocean Palace was receiving an unexpected visitor, though they did not know it. Within their territory, the sky stretched like a vast light blue ocean, clear, without a single imperfection. The sunlight fell in soft, golden waves, like warm fingers caressing every grain of sand and every fold of the sea. The breeze was light, fresh, carrying the salty perfume of the ocean and the distant sound of birds flying in slow, tranquil circles, as if nothing on that horizon could disturb them. The sun high above made the ocean sparkle in shades of silver and sapphire. Sometimes, when the light hit at a specific angle, greenish glimmers appeared, almost ethereal, reminiscent of the interior of a pearl. Renzu emerged from the spatial rift calmly. The air around him quieted instantly, as if space itself bowed in reverence, sealing the tear behind him without leaving traces. He floated calmly above the vast and infinite ocean, near the clouds that dragged lazily across the sky, tinged with a deep blue speckled by touches of ethereal white. The salty wind of the southern ocean blew against his face, carrying the damp smell of salt and the distant echo of waves breaking against invisible reefs. His black hair danced lightly, and his white robes rippled like veils of mist, immaculate and untouched by the air's humidity. Below him, the sea stretched like an infinite carpet of dark sapphire. Renzu tilted his head slightly, his black eyes sweeping the horizon with lazy, unhurried curiosity. There was a dark blue light oscillating endlessly about 5 kilometers in front of him. There was a small island that was almost perfectly round, and on top of this island there was a dome-shaped barrier that covered it completely. The dark blue radiation was coming from the barrier that covered the small island. The ocean around the small island had sunk so low that it formed trenches around it. It was almost as if the ocean water was being pushed by an unimaginable power. Finally, I've arrived at my main destination, Renzu murmured with a slight smile beneath his white mask that covered the lower half of his face. He looked at the various disciples who were on guard on the island and pondered. From what I remember of the original story, this place is located in the ocean and is more than 1,500 kilometers away from the mainland. Normally, no one approaches this place because there are always disciples from the Supreme Ocean Palace keeping watch. Even if someone manages to enter by accident, the Sovereign of the Seas will be alerted immediately as soon as the person comes into contact with the barrier. Shaking his head negatively, he said calmly, "Well, I'm going to teleport directly inside anyway. I could have done that before, but I wanted to check something." His black eyes settled on the profound barrier that enveloped the island. It was much better to analyze that type of profound formation from the outside than from the inside. Among those who truly understood what it meant to create a profound formation, there was an absolute consensus. Entering blindly without minimally understanding its structure was pure idiocy. And although he had no fear at all, after all, in this world, only a certain red-haired girl would be capable of injuring him, since everything else was nothing but trash. He was still, by nature, someone cautious and meticulous in his plans. This would become evident when he meticulously architected every step to conquer the woman he desired and obtain the Golden Crow legacy, even though he already possessed the Vermilion Bird legacy. Something that, theoretically, was impossible considering how absurdly arrogant the Golden Crow was. But he also didn't need much time to analyze the profound formation that enveloped the place. Technically, all types of barriers, whether for isolation or protection, fell within the domain of formations. As a master in that field, he quickly identified the barrier's structure, the way it had been assembled, and all the details involved in its construction. A single glance was enough. Even without possessing absolute mastery over the spatial laws, he could open a breach in the barrier without being detected. If he wanted, he could dismantle the entire isolation barrier or even improve it with the same ease. It was enough to desire it. However, he had no intention whatsoever of interfering with the barrier. His focus was on what would come next: killing the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign, obtaining one of the 3 fragments of the world-defying Heaven Manual, the Evil Infant's Wheel of Myriad Tribulations, and, obviously, the Devil Origin Orb. As for the latter, he would still need to make the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign launch it against him in the hope of injuring or killing him. For that, he would have to go easy at first, instigating the creature's despair until it resorted to its last resource, something that was not difficult. Furthermore, he could not reveal even a trace of his dark, profound energy. Otherwise, the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign might suspect that he was a practitioner who cultivated diabolic energy, something he wished to avoid out of pure precaution. He did not have absolute certainty whether someone who cultivated dark, profound energy would be able to assimilate the Devil Origin Orb or not. Yun-Che managed to do so only after receiving the Darkness Seed from the evil god, but that was completely outside the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign's plans in the original story, since he launched his Devil Origin Orb as a last resort to make Yun-Che suffer and kill him. Basically, the Darkness Laws factor could become a problem and prevent him from obtaining the Devil Origin Orb. Perhaps, if the Moon Slaughter Devil Sovereign had realized that Yun-Che was capable of cultivating diabolic energy, he would never have launched the orb at him. In any case, he needed to maintain extreme caution. Fortunately, that posed no difficulty. His cultivation method possessed a passive skill capable of completely concealing his profound aura level and any characteristic related to his cultivation. Even in direct combat, no one would be able to perceive anything. And even without that skill, he could still resort to the spatial laws to conceal his profound aura. The technique he had created and used to hide in the lake where the little demon empress was bathing also had that effect. Although its main purpose was to completely conceal his existence, to the point of becoming impossible to be perceived by any being, it equally suppressed his profound aura in a perfect manner. In any case, after taking one more look at the disciples, he immediately disappeared like a ghost, successfully entering the Moon Slaughter Devil Nest. /N. Did you enjoy the chapter? Then you should know that over on my Patreon you can read up to 20 chapters ahead for just $5. And yes, for that price you also get full access to all of my content. That's right. Cheaper than a snack, and with way more drama, action, and guaranteed emotional damage. The link is right below. See you there. My Patreon. Patreon.com/fanfictionnovels. Thank you so much for your support. You make all of this worthwhile. 69. Chapter 69 Moon Slaughter Devil Nest. The darkness swallowed him the instant he crossed the barrier. It wasn't a simple absence of light. It was something dense, viscous, that seemed to want to crawl over the skin, enter through the pores, weigh on the lungs. The energy of the darkness here was so pure and concentrated that even the air seemed to have become a black and icy liquid. Although its intensity was quite low compared to the evil god's dimension, it was still something terrible. Even someone in the sovereign profound realm would have difficulty remaining in the place for long due to the darkness that seemed to devour everything. They would be suppressed by 2 entire realms, and at the same time, our vitality would also be drained quickly. Fortunately, he was not an ordinary profound practitioner. Renzu merely took a step forward, calmly, like someone entering a cool room after a hot summer day. The cold and malignant breeze that licked his face was pleasantly refreshing, actually. It felt like an autumn wind carrying the smell of dry leaves and wet earth. Nothing more than that. Having endured more than 10,000 years of darkness energy, which is of such high quality, slowly devouring everything, the spatial laws of this place had long been distorted, but he had no problem teleporting out of this place. He could leave whenever he wanted and could also move through space to the places he wanted to go within the lair instantly. Since his senses were somewhat limited, moving through his spatial domain was the best way. Therefore, he arrived directly where the netherworld Audumbra flower was blooming. His black eyes landed on it casually. It was slightly taller than 3 meters in height. Its stem and leaves had a mixture of green and black colors. Amid this fantastic glow of a purple light, a flower could be seen. Each petal seemed to be made of radiant purple jade, but the beginning of the stem was still slightly curved upward, and the petals had not yet fully developed. Even though it had an extremely radiant and enchanting appearance, it was not completely bloomed yet. The Moon Slaughter Devil Nest was a desolate place, and its air was stagnant. Still, the nearly bloomed netherworld Audumbra flower swayed gently, releasing a mist of purple light that seemed to come from the underworld itself. And from time to time, it emitted terrifying sounds that seemed to be a mixture of lamentation and laughter. It was so sinister that it made the souls of those who heard it tremble. The flower continued to sway softly, as if it weren't in the center of one of the most cursed places in the world. The purple mist rose in slow spirals, touching the air, touching the darkness, touching even the silence itself. Renzu walked, without haste. Each step was light, almost lazy, as if he were crossing an ordinary garden. As he approached the netherworld Audumbra flower, his body began to emit a subtle glow, limpid, translucent like divine glass under moonlight. The heavens' crystal body was active. The darkness energy and the soul-stealing ability of the flower that tried to cling to him simply slid off, repelled by that inner light, unable to leave any trace. It was like mud trying to stain a perfect mirror. No matter how much it tried, it was always rejected. He extended his hands slowly, observing the flower with an almost casual interest, like someone analyzing a rare plant in an exotic market. It's still not completely mature, he murmured amusedly. What a shame. But it will do. At the exact instant his fingers almost touched the purple mist, he felt it, a gaze full of killing intent fixing on him. It didn't come from the front, nor from the sides, but from the depths of the darkness behind the flower, at a point where not even the purple mist dared to spread. Renzu stopped the movement of his hand in the air. He turned his face slowly in that direction, his black eyes calm like a lake without ripples. I only came here to pick a flower, he said calmly. A single flower. A slight smile appeared under the white mask. And, along the way, it seems I found a rat hidden in this hole. The silence that followed was heavy. Then the darkness stirred. 2 points of a deep gray light suddenly came to life in the boundless darkness above Renzu's head. They were an extremely horrible pair of eyes. Arrogant human. The reason you disregarded your own life and entered this place was to ask this king to kill you personally. How dare you call this magnificent king a rat? You inferior life form. He wasn't the least bit perplexed that Renzu had discovered his existence. And his hoarse, raspy voice was full of a violence and arrogance that made one's heart pound. If I'm not mistaken, you must be that moon-slaughter devil sovereign who lived here 10,000 years ago. Renzu asked calmly, already knowing the answer. Ha 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 ha. That terrible voice burst into laughter. This king only declared his name once to you humans, but who would have thought that someone would still remember it after 10,000 years have passed? Even though this king hasn't seen the light of day in all these thousands of years, a single appearance was enough to plunge your wretched creatures into an eternal abyss of terror. Ha 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 ha. The voice of the moon-slaughter devil sovereign was extremely unpleasant, and he could barely understand what he was saying. Moreover, each word pronounced by his mouth made his body shudder, and that laughter was extremely hard to endure. But the laughter ceased abruptly, as if he remembered the 2 offenses Renzu had made earlier, calling him a rat. It's no use glorifying this king who has already sentenced you to death. The moon-slaughter devil sovereign roared, his piercing, soul-chilling voice full of fury, contempt, and disdain. That pair of eyes, which looked like 2 gray abysses, suddenly descended from the air. Moreover, not only do you have interest in the netherworld Audiobook flower, you're still dreaming that this king will let you live. Bam! With a gigantic explosion, a huge gray figure landed with impact in front of Renzu. A funereal aura, which seemed to come from hell itself, struck Renzu, who stood calmly while his white robes fluttered. From that voice, he could tell it was no more than 30 meters away, but the only thing he could see in the darkness were those white-gray eyes. Moreover, he couldn't even distinguish a silhouette. Even though the moon-slaughter devil sovereign was nearby, he still couldn't see him. However, Renzu felt a terrible pressure envelop him, as the monster sought to crush his body and soul. This pressure was entirely different from any other type he had suffered in his life. A cold, violent rancor and absurd arrogance and bloodlust. He felt a dense wave of negative emotions enveloping every corner of that dark world. Suddenly, he was struck by the terrible feeling that he was sealed in some kind of infernal volcano and was about to suffer the most unimaginable and cruel punishments. The root of this king's own life and soul was left in tatters, so I had no choice but to seal myself in this place, not daring to see the light of day for 10,000 years. The darkness energy here helped this king slowly recover my vitality and strength, and this netherworld Audiobook flower can restore the origin of this king's soul. This is something with which the heavens have blessed me. It's the most precious thing in my life. In this shameful place, the day this flower blooms every 24 years is what this king most awaits. And to think that an inferior, foolish, and insignificant life form like you would dare to covet the object that this king most venerates. A wave of energy as cold as ice exploded, tearing the air as if space itself had shuddered. The eyes of the moon-slaughter devil sovereign, previously white-gray, became completely black, so deep they looked like holes carved into reality. Around his body, the black mist thickened grotesquely, like living smoke that twisted and crawled, forming shadowy tentacles that brushed the ground and sky without distinction. The darkness of the lair, which was already a dense sea of darkness energy, began to react violently. Currents of darkness exploded like malignant gales, swirling around the monster like an obscene hurricane, lifting black dust, tearing rocks, deforming the air. The moon-slaughter devil nest trembled. The ground itself seemed to regret existing there. Amid this eruption of force, the devil sovereign advanced. It was too fast for mortal eyes, a gray blur that pierced the darkness like silent thunder. He didn't attack Renzu while near the flower, he wouldn't dare, but he moved to rip Renzu from that area before the clash of forces destroyed his most precious possession. The blow fell like a mountain. Renzu raised only one hand, almost distractedly, to parry the impact. The sound didn't echo, it was swallowed by the darkness, but the effect spread like a seismic wave. His body slid across the ground as if pushed by a strong breeze, except that this breeze launched him nearly a kilometer away. He stopped exactly where he wanted, with his feet touching the void as if stepping on invisible glass of space itself. Beside him, the colossal figure of the devil sovereign emerged from the darkness, his eyes burning with pure savagery. Renzu sighed at that moment. His skin glowed, first with a soft shimmer, then with a warm explosion. The golden crow flames surged, enveloped in pure gold, rising over his body like solar serpents. The glow tore through the darkness like a violent dawn, repelling the energy, burning the malignant mist, opening space amid the chaos. The darkness fled from him like wild animals before fire. For an instant, Renzu looked like a sun floating within an eternal abyss. This is indeed a meaningless fight, the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign said with cold contempt and mockery. If it were the flames of the vermilion bird, this king might feel a hint of disturbance. But these modest golden crow flames are merely a pitiful joke. Renzu smiled, only with his eyes. And then, they collided. Two worlds. Two absolutely incompatible forces. The explosion of energy illuminated the entire underworld. The Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign struck with claws that cut space, but Renzu dodged with minimal movement, leaving luminous trails in his path. Golden flames exploded with each block, each touch, each wave released, clashing against the darkness that surged in violent torrents. Boom! 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 The Moonslaughter Devil Nest was enduring the greatest and most terrible calamity since its existence, while fierce flames and sinister darkness filled every corner. The space within was madly collapsing in on itself, and the thunderous explosion sounded as if produced by a heavenly belt that was being repeatedly crushed by a huge mountain. At that moment, if there were other profound practitioners on the scene, even if they were strong individuals in the Emperor Profound realm, just these earth-shaking explosions would be enough to instantly make their energies and blood flow in reverse, causing them to become unconscious. And if they were weaker than that, they could simply be killed on the spot, destroyed completely in body and soul. A man and a devil had already exchanged hundreds of attacks in this sealed world of darkness. It was as if both had reached some kind of agreement, for their forces continued to ascend indefinitely. Both man and devil kept pushing each other and testing the limit of each other's power. The catastrophe that had engulfed the Moonslaughter Devil Nest grew more and more intense, and it was as if a small world had been thrown into the mouth of an erupting volcano. Only the half-bloomed netherworld Adumbra flower remained undisturbed, even though it was right in the eye of the storm. It swayed gently and unhurriedly while continuing to release ghostly moans from time to time. Renzu's expression hadn't changed at all since the beginning of the confrontation naturally. He was taking it lightly and using only the golden crow flames so as not to accidentally kill the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign. If he wanted to end it quickly, he would have used the vermilion bird flames and killed him with a single blow, but he needed to bring despair to the ancient devil. On the other hand, the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign was becoming more and more worried. He was a devil, a true devil from ancient times, and he was a ruler among them. Moreover, it was basic understanding for all devils that humans were mere inferior life forms, not much different from scurrying ants. In the past, a casual wave of his hand would have been enough to destroy a planet containing billions of humans. So even though his life and soul origin had been incredibly damaged, and his current strength was not even a fraction of what it used to be, the disdain he had for humans was still etched into his very bones. Even in his current weakened state, the aura Renzu emitted was still several times weaker than his. And even though he had the golden crow flames, being the heir of that golden chicken, in the eyes of the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign, he was still an insect. However, from the moment he exchanged blows for the first time with Renzu, shock began to resonate within his soul. He not only didn't grow weaker with each exchange, but instead became more and more intense with each moment. Initially, he hadn't used all his strength, because when facing an inferior-level creature like him, using all his grandeur would be a great stain on his name. After realizing that Renzu's strength was much greater than what he had initially anticipated, he also began to increase the power he used. But no matter how much his power increased, Renzu was able to match it. And at that moment, it had reached a point where he was using 100% of his strength, and yet he was unable to suppress the miserable human. And what about the ability to use those golden crow flames? He never thought he would be burned or injured by such an inferior thing. The expression of the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign distorted fiercely, and a black light suddenly exploded from his diabolical pupils. The highest level of his profound art, the illusory devil tome of eternal night, was instantly activated, and the diabolical dark energy surged from his entire body without limits. Renzu seemed casual. He smiled under the mask and decided to take it a little more seriously, using the 6th-stage Golden Crow's record of the burning world, Purgatory Red Lotus. Boom! The explosion that followed was not just sound, light, or impact. It was the collision of two contrary and absolute principles clashing at the same point of existence. The ancestral darkness of the illusory devil tome of eternal night tore the air, condensed into dense layers of hatred, hunger, rot, and death, while the Purgatory Red Lotus bloomed over Renzu's hand as if hell itself had decided to take the form of a flower. The fire petals surged first as a red glow, then as incandescent blades, and then as a devouring whirlwind of heat that seemed to want to carbonize the very soul of everything it touched. Each petal spun with a glow that resembled molten metal, but there was something deeper there, a cruel, tragic beauty, as if the flower had been created to remind the heavens how insignificant they were before that fire. The meeting of the two forces exploded in the center of the lair like a deformed sun. Space collapsed like cracking glass, opening deep cuts that snaked across the dark walls of the moonslaughter devil nest. The ground sank. The rock columns shattered like old bones. The black mist was carbonized in a wave that advanced for kilometers. For an instant, the entire underworld seemed to have stopped to try to understand what it was witnessing. Renzu remained calmly where he was, while the huge diabolical body of the moonslaughter devil sovereign had collided with the stone ceiling above before violently falling from it. After that, he had rolled for dozens of meters before finally colliding with a stone wall. When the moonslaughter devil sovereign finally stood up, his eyes and expression had changed completely. Even his breathing had become incredibly heavy. He, a grand devil lord, and to think that he had been thrown into the air by a human. Thrown into the air by a human. Thrown. It was as if a diabolical curse echoed in his ears and soul again and again. When he had been injured by Renzu's golden crow flames, it was because he was in a state of total shock from that golden chicken's flames being so strong and hadn't reacted quickly enough to defend himself. But this time, he had clearly used all his powers in a total confrontation, and there were no tricks involved either. And yet, he was thrown in the end. Thrown into the air by a human. What kind of humiliation is this? It also clearly proved that the human standing before him, the human he thought would be as insignificant as an ant, actually had power that rivaled his own. Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign, you kept calling me pathetic and inferior human. So I was here thinking you were much better, but it seems you're just that. Renzu dusted off his clothes. You dare? Regardless of Renzu's reckless mockery, the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign had already become so irritated and embarrassed by this humiliation that all his ability to rationalize had practically flown out the window. During the primordial era, even in the world of devils, he was still a devil who stood out above the rest. Mere humans weren't even qualified to kneel in his presence. And yet now, he had been thrown by a human, injured by a human, looked down upon disdainfully by a human, and even mocked by a human. This was a humiliation he had never experienced in his entire life. Eternal night, without light. As he uttered these words with a voice full of hatred enough to encircle the universe, a vast darkness descended from the sky like a totally black curtain. As he uttered these words with a voice full of hatred enough to encircle the universe, a vast darkness descended from the sky like a totally black curtain. Renzu observed all this with a lazy expression, almost bored, as if watching a mediocre performance in an empty theater. His black eyes didn't blink, and a light sigh escaped his lips. Well, I think it's time to end this. In the next instant, the golden crow flames dancing around his body extinguished like candles blown out by a casual breeze. The gold melted into the air, dissipating into sparks that were swallowed by the darkness. But in their place, something new emerged. Crimson-red flames, soft as silk but intense as the heart of a star. They flowed from his skin, from his pores, tinting the abyss with a ruby glow that defied the very nature of the darkness. They were the divine flames feared by the devil race. The vermilion bird flames, the primordial force that purified. For devils, they weren't just fire, they were the supreme poison. The incarnate terror that made their souls recoil like beasts before a divine predator. The Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign froze in the air, his gray eyes dilating in pure horror. The darkness he had invoked began to tremble, receding as if alive and terrified. To this, vermilion bird flames? How does a miserable human like you possess the fire of the sacred bird? Renzu didn't respond. Instead, he raised his right hand with a fluid, almost artistic movement, as if painting in the air. The profound energy in his body responded instantly, channeling the first stage of the vermilion bird's consoling spirit song. The crimson flames condensed in his palm, swirling in spirals that formed an ethereal blade, the blood-stained solar blade. It materialized as a sword of red light, pulsing with veins of flaming blood, illuminating with a glow as resplendent as a supernova. The air around hissed, space distorted, and the entire lair seemed to be purified. With a casual, lazy slash, as if pruning an unwanted plant, Renzu swung the blade toward the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign. There was no sound of wind being cut, nor an immediate explosion, just a ruby flash that crossed the abyss, ignoring the darkness as if it were an illusion. The blade struck the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign full on, cutting his colossal body from top to bottom with absolute precision. The diabolical flesh, hard as ancestral mountains, parted like wet paper. Blood gushed like a river of living ink, evaporating in the air at the touch of the flames. The devil roared, a sound that echoed like the lament of 1,000 tortured souls, but his power recoiled violently, suppressed by the vermilion bird flames, which made his soul tremble uncontrollably with primordial fear. It was as if the fire were burning not just his flesh, but his very existence, corroding the roots of his diabolical origin. The huge body of the Devil Sovereign crashed against the ground with an impact that cracked the entire lair, creating fissures that spread like spider webs. He writhed, trying to rise, but his claws trembled, his once oppressive aura now reduced to a weak whisper. Flaming wounds covered his torso, burning ceaselessly, preventing any regeneration. He was on the brink of death, his vitality escaping like smoke, his soul screaming in absolute panic. Renzu appeared in front of him calmly while asking, "What are your last words, little rat?" Cough. The moon-slaughtered Devil Sovereign spoke with a voice full of pain and despair. Even the evil god's seal, which lasted for 1,000,000 years, was unable to kill this king, and yet, this king died at the hands of a pathetic human. But at the end of his lament, he began to laugh strangely. Heh. But you'll go with me, you cursed human. At that moment, his remaining arm trembled into the air as it slowly rose from the ground. The remaining diabolical claws began to stretch wide while starting to emit a weak and light black light. A totally black orb, the size of a dragon's eye, appeared in the middle of the moon-slaughtered Devil Sovereign's hand, which was enveloped in black light. His diabolical claws began to tremble as he spoke in a hoarse voice full of resentment. Pathetic human, who despised this king. This king will sacrifice this devil origin orb to consign you to eternal damnation. All the remaining power in his broken body was gathered in that trembling arm, and he threw something forward. The totally black devil origin orb flew through the darkness before making contact with Renzu and directly burying itself inside his body. Ha, ha 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 ha, ha 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 ha. The moon-slaughtered Devil Sovereign began to laugh wildly, and his hoarse laughter contained pain, sadness, and a distorted happiness before finally dying. His body being burned to ashes by the vermilion bird flames. /N. Did you enjoy the chapter? Then you should know that over on my Patreon you can read up to 20 chapters ahead for just $5. And yes, for that price you also get full access to all of my content. That's right, cheaper than a snack, and with way more drama, action, and guaranteed emotional damage. The link is right below. See you there. My Patreon. Patreon.com/fanfictionnovels. Thank you so much for your support. You make all of this worthwhile. 70. Chapter 70, Plundering the Moon-Slaughter Devil Nest. Renzu watched as the body of the moon-slaughter Devil Sovereign disintegrated into ashes, while the vermilion bird flames consumed what remained of the carcass with an almost casual indifference. After all, that was the king of the Eternal Night Devil clan, a devil who had survived the calamity that had ravaged gods and demons in ancient times, and who had also escaped the million-year seal imposed by the evil god. Yet, in the end, he had perished at the hands of a mere human, reduced to ashes forever in the eternal darkness of the moon-slaughter devil nest. The devilish body, stripped of the god-devil's power, had no way to avoid the fate of being completely incinerated. Still, the clouds of black ashes were faintly illuminated by beams of a strange, dim light. But he did not devote all his attention to the defeated enemy. For someone like him, dividing his mind into 2 or 3 streams of thought was trivial. And while his gaze remained fixed on the disintegrating corpse, his consciousness turned inward, carefully examining his own body. He could clearly feel the devil origin orb that had fused with his profound veins, but he was not concerned about it and suffered no adverse effects. After all, this was precisely one of the things he had come to seek in that place, and he was already fully prepared. With his absolute dominion over the laws of darkness and his cultivation method capable of integrating with them in the same way Yunche absorbed the darkness seed, the fusion was as natural as eating or drinking. As soon as it entered his body, the orb simply submitted to him, inevitably becoming his subordinate. If he knew his final plan had gone wrong in this way, he'd be rolling in his grave, right? Renzu said with good humor. The ancient devil had underestimated him, fought believing he held the advantage throughout the confrontation, and in the end, was killed in an almost casual manner. For him, dying at the hands of a human, someone infinitely inferior in his eyes, must have been an unbearable humiliation. He had probably come to hate him as much as he hated the evil god who had sealed him in that place. From that point, it was not difficult to deduce the moon-slaughter Devil Sovereign's reasoning. After seeing him use the vermilion bird divine flames before being killed by them, he must have concluded that that power would destroy him. And, being an ancient devil god arrogant to the extreme, he would not allow him a simple death. That was why he unleashed the devil origin orb. In his view, the 2 opposing forces would clash within his body, tearing him apart from the inside out and condemning him to eternal agony. Exactly as he had planned. In other words, his plans had worked perfectly. Unfortunately for the dead devil, he was not a simple, profound practitioner. His body, tempered by his 10 extreme Taoist cultivation method, had become a vessel of the primordial Tao, capable of assimilating, subjugating, and refining any essence, no matter how antagonistic. In other words, the instant the devil origin orb fused with his profound veins as an independent existence, it ceased to pose a threat. He could control it with the same ease as breathing. When devil gods of the devil race are developing in their mother's wombs, they begin their existence as a devil origin orb. From that initial point, the orb generates the devil body, the devil soul, and the devil god's origin energy. In other words, the devil origin orb is the essential source of a devil god's life, soul, and power. That is precisely why it is called the devil origin orb. According to what he knew, its power existed independently, uninfluenced by its bearer's cultivation. On the contrary, it continuously strengthened itself. When fully fused with the profound veins, the devil origin orb becomes a hidden and independent source of power within them, functioning as a secret core that sustains and nourishes the user's strength. Although he had obtained countless benefits, in his view, his greatest gain without a doubt was the Eternal Night illusory devil tome. He had comprehended it during the battle against the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign, who had used the technique in its most complete form while fighting him. That was one of his secondary plans in prolonging the confrontation. Besides humiliating the ancient devil and making him hate him deeply, he also intended to fully learn that profound art. And in the end, he got exactly what he needed. He had been seeking a darkness profound art and ended up obtaining a perfect one. That was why he was in a good mood. The kind of light and serene humor that only arose when everything went exactly as he had planned, or better, when his enemies, full of confidence, executed on their own the most convenient version possible of the plan he had already foreseen. While humming in his mind, he walked toward the dead devil god's body. Since his body had turned to ashes, he had noticed with his keen vision that a bizarre black light was being reflected by the vermilion bird flames. Renzu approached and extended his hand toward the item glowing with light, retrieving it from the pile of ashes. It was a round piece of black jade that fit perfectly in his palm. It was heavy and cold to the touch, and completely black. It was extremely smooth and glossy, and he could not see a single marking or rune anywhere on its surface. One of the fragments of the world-defying heaven manual, he murmured calmly, twirling the jade between his fingers as he examined it closely. No matter how much he looked, he could find nothing unusual about it. Still, he knew exactly what it was thanks to his knowledge of that world, one of the fragments of the legacy left by the ancestral goddess herself. It is divided into 3 fragments. It is an omnipotent profound art created by the ancestral god over millions of years. She did not want the fruit of her labor to disappear, but at the same time feared that her creation was too powerful to exist in complete form. Therefore, she divided it into 3 parts and sent them to different corners of the primal chaos. Deciphering the divine texts of the absolute beginning is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Still, if a mortal manages to cultivate the world-defying heaven manual, they will have the possibility of becoming a true god. Whoever cast a glance at that small piece of jade would never imagine it was one of the fragments of that profound art. There was no mark, rune, or indication of power, not even the slightest trace of aura. Judging solely by the energy it emanated, it was nothing more than a common piece of jade, inferior even to the lowest grade of profound jade. Although he wanted to try unraveling its mysteries, he decided to leave it for later, so he stored it in his spatial ring and continued walking in a specific direction. Renzu continued walking straight until the end of the Moonslaughter Devil Nest and stopped in front of a stone wall. He casually used his profound strength to destroy it with a clean strike. Beyond the stone wall, layers upon layers of extremely potent black energy slowly overflowed, accompanied by a dangerous aura that made even his heart tighten. He extended his arm, and a blood-red orb of light appeared in his palm, a mixture of his vermilion bird divine flames and light profound energy. In an instant, every corner of the Moonslaughter Devil Nest was illuminated by blood-red light without exception. All the profound darkness energy in that place was swept away as if it had encountered its natural enemy. After doing this, he stepped over the demolished wall, and his footsteps finally entered the dark world beyond the stone wall. As soon as he entered the world beyond the destroyed wall, relying on the red light in his hand, with just one glance he could already see the object emitting the black energy and dangerous aura. The silhouette of a black roulette wheel appeared before his eyes. Its body was black, but perhaps its existence had already transcended darkness. It was like the open eye of a devil in an endless abyss, the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations. At the beginning of the primordial era, created using the utmost negative energy of the primal chaos and possessing the most powerful and malevolent energy, that was a terrifying existence that even gods and devils feared. Although it was listed among the divine profound treasures, it was not truly a treasure, but the most horrifying existence in the primordial dimension. Despite ranking second among the divine profound treasures, it and the heaven-punishing ancestral sword had been forged simultaneously from 2 extreme energies. In terms of destructive power, it was not inferior to the heaven-punishing ancestral sword. However, Due to the fact that the heaven-punishing ancestral sword's energy attribute was sacred and the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations was malevolent, it could only be ranked after it. The last time it had appeared, the explosion of energy, as well as the release of the most terrifying poison of the primordial world, myriad tribulations, eradicated all gods and devils, bringing their era to extinction. Its power and terror were things no living being could imagine or comprehend. After the end of the era of gods and devils, it had disappeared along with the heaven-punishing ancestral sword and never appeared again. However, in the past millions of years, humans had never given up searching for the sword, as they hoped to possess the invincible power to smite the heavens. However, no one had ever tried to find the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, because that would only provoke the most terrifying catastrophe in the world. Well, only someone as villainous as him would seek out an object like that, Renzu thought with irony, while feeling cold sweat trickle down his back. Even with his extraordinary mental fortitude, he was still human, and upon encountering that feared artifact lost for 1,000,000 years, a slight dread sprouted in his heart before the profound aura it emanated. Even a true god would tremble at the sight of it, so what to say of a mere villain like him? Still, despite the fear, he did not let it dominate him. In fact, he was excited, for with this, he would finally have an absolute trump card. Calming his emotions, Renzu continued to approach. 1 step, 2 steps, gradually drawing nearer to the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations. As he drew closer to it, the pressure emanating from it rapidly diminished. No matter how powerful the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations was, it was still an object, not a living being. To unleash its full potential, it needed a living being as a medium. A normal artifact, even if it possessed a strong consciousness and spiritual force, would still be controlled by a living being. However, in the case of the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, its level and power were far superior. Instead, it could control the living being, or even a devil. The Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign was precisely the being chosen by the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations. Or perhaps it was more accurate to call him its host. Millions of years ago, the devils, driven into a frenzy by being forced to fight one desperate danger after another, had broken the seal on the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, allowing it to return to the world once more. After being sealed for so long, it had accumulated infinite amounts of negative energy. As soon as it escaped its bonds, its energy exploded wildly, and it took the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign as its host. Then, it unleashed the myriad tribulations, which had the power to destroy heaven and earth as well as exterminate all gods and devils. Moreover, the heaven-punishing ancestral sword, the only item that could oppose it, remained missing, leading to the extermination of the gods and devils. As for the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign, as the host controlled by the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, he naturally had to survive. After eradicating all gods and devils, its powers had drastically diminished, perhaps even to the point of complete exhaustion. However, besides the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign, another god had not been extinguished, and that was the evil god, who was not defeated despite being poisoned by the myriad tribulations. Although the power of the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations had weakened drastically, the evil god still could not destroy it. In this world, there was nothing that could. As the host of the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign also could not be destroyed by the evil god. Therefore, all the evil god could do was use all his remaining strength to seal the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, along with the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign, and hope that prolonged sealing could eradicate its existence. This was also the reason why the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign had only been sealed by the evil god for millions of years, and not killed by him at that time. It was not that the evil god did not want to, it was because he could not. The seal left by the evil god was not simple. It also possessed strong devouring powers. During those millions of years of sealing, the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations was constantly devoured by the evil god's powers. Its already depleted powers were weakening further, to the point of even losing control over the Lunar Slaughter Devil Sovereign, meaning he was no longer its host and they had become independent existences. This was also why the sovereign had said in the original story to Scumche that the evil god's seal destroyed this king's devil body and soul, but also allowed him to regain his freedom. Once he was no longer the host of the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign had also lost its protection and suffered from the evil god's devouring powers, causing his vitality and soul origin to become severely damaged. Eventually, 10,000 years ago, the power of the evil god's seal finally dissipated, allowing the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations and the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign to break free. However, having suffered from the evil god's devouring powers for 1,000,000 years, the Lunar Slaughter Devil Sovereign's soul power had become exceptionally weak. Originally, it would not take long for him to be completely destroyed, But fortunately he was found by the founder of the Supreme Ocean Palace and then sealed within the Moonslaughter Devil Nest. Therefore, within the Supreme Ocean Palace's seal, he relied on the black aura emitted by the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, as well as the netherworld Adumber flower that had bloomed for his survival. Until he was killed by him, Renzu stopped and stood before the wheel of myriad tribulations of the evil infant, his eyes reflecting the dark glow that made him seem like a black abyss. He said slowly, "After the end of the era of gods, countless people speculated about the location of the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, and even more tried to uncover what the evil god had done before his defeat. I never imagined that I would truly be the first person in the world to discover the answer. This planet was the first world created by the evil god and the place where he was defeated. So, the root of the problem lies right here. It was so that, even if you managed to escape the seal one day, in a world with such scarce energy concentration and low level, you would never have the chance to recover your energy quickly. The evil god was certainly meticulous. If the evil god could not destroy you, that does not mean I cannot. But I believe it would be better to seal you for another billion years. What do you think? If I set up a profound formation that draws on the energy of heaven and earth, when this world is destroyed, you will still remain sealed for a time until it unravels." Sniff! The dark glow of the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations trembled. In Renzu's mind, a shrill and soft voice rang out, laden with injustice, sorrow, and plea, something akin to the helpless cries of a baby. "Please, save me." A gentle voice, capable of breaking someone's heart, pleaded softly, 3 short words, but trembling, as if spoken by a child who had just learned to talk. Renzu's eyebrows furrowed. He smiled slowly beneath the mask. "I never imagined that the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, which would make even gods and devils cower, would actually beg for help from a pathetic human like me. Please, save me. Take me away from here." The baby's voice pleaded even more, almost sobbing. "Save you? I believe that is not remotely feasible. You are the most terrifying, the most evil, the most vile existence in this world. In the past, even gods and devils died because of you. If I took you out of here and allowed you to recover your strength, the world would be doomed again for all eternity. It is not just me, even the most malevolent person in the world, if they knew you were the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, would use all their power to seal you and never allow you to see the light of day again. No!" The baby's voice became sad and tearful. "I am not that evil. I am not a bad child. I just want to get out of here. It is so dark, so cold, and it is always so silent." The wheel's voice conjured in the mind the image of a tender baby. Its helplessness and sadness were enough to touch even a heart of stone. However, Renzu was not moved in the slightest. "Do not try to deceive me. At the beginning of the primordial era, the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations was born from the most extreme negative energy, representing the most sinful power. Millions of years ago, when it escaped its bonds, it exterminated all gods and devils, destroying an entire era. And now you say you are not a bad child? Ridiculous. That is merely the attribute of my power. Energy can be positive or negative, but it does not distinguish between good and evil. I only killed them at that moment, because they locked me away for so many years. What I feared most was darkness and loneliness. So I hated them. I killed, so they could never take me back to that dark and lonely world." Renzu's expression did not change in the slightest. The feelings of anger, fear, and injustice seemed extremely real. There was no perceptible falsehood. It was like listening to an abused child explaining why they had taken revenge on the world. He smiled calmly. "You are called evil infant. But do you really think I will believe your soul is that of a baby? You are the most malevolent existence in this world. Spare me. I will seal you again right now. Even if I die, I will leave someone to continue the mission and ensure you never see the light again." Sniff! The baby's voice turned into pained sobbing. "Why? Do you not believe me? Then, I..." A dark mist rose before Renzu, and within it, the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations transformed into a black light and entered between his eyebrows. Renzu raised his left hand. On the back, a small mark of a black will slowly emerged. He mobilized his domineering, profound energy due to his cultivation method and spoke calmly. "Do you still think you are the same evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations that exterminated gods and devils? With your current strength, you want to take me as your host? That makes it even easier to seal you." I do not." The baby's voice replied quickly, flustered. "As long as you are willing to take me away from the darkness and loneliness, I am willing to submit to you." "Submit to me? Seriously? You are the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations. Alongside the heaven-smiting ancestral sword, you are at the highest levels of the primal chaos realm. Not even a god can control you. How would you submit to a human? He continued with his perfect performance. If you can take me to the outside world, I will not have to face darkness and loneliness. In the future, you will be my master. If you fear my power, then, if you become my master, you will not need to fear that I will harm you. Renzu smiled beneath the mask. If I become your master, you will be controlled by me. I will be your eternal and absolute master. Is that truly fine? You accept. The baby's voice became excited. As long as I do not have to be trapped in darkness and loneliness anymore, I will obey you. Renzu could not believe that voice came from the malevolent and terrifying artifact that had destroyed an entire era. But he found it amusing. He smiled calmly. Very well. Then we will follow the most cruel contract between master and slave. I as master, you as slave. Unless I cancel the agreement, you will be eternally controlled by me, unable to betray me. And when I die, you will follow me. Do not forget that. You will have to protect me very well, understood? The red light flashed between Renzu's eyebrows, linking the contract to the artifact. To his surprise, the wheel accepted joyfully, like a caged bird that had finally won its freedom. The black mark flickered a few times before disappearing. From now on, you are no longer the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations that exterminated gods and devils. Now, you belong to me. He used his cultivation method once more to seal the master-slave contract. Thus, he truly became the eternal master of the second-ranked item on the list of the 7 divine profound treasures. He could feel the artifact's spirit's joy, helplessness, and sorrow. After all, the wheel was one of the 2 correction devices left by the ancestral goddess for the purification of all creations. The goddess had bestowed upon it the pure and immaculate spirit of a child, so that it could perceive and absorb both the good and evil of the world. If it received love, kindness, and care from those around it, it would grow attached to the world and see it as something worth protecting. But if all it encountered was malice and hostility, then in its eyes, the world would become perverse and tainted, leading it to invoke the myriad tribulations to purify the turbid souls of creation. Unfortunately for the world, when it fell into the hands of the devil race, they chose to treat it in the worst possible way. Its childish and untamable temperament, combined with a power that surpassed even that of the devil emperors, made the devil race extremely wary of it. Instead of guiding or nurturing it, they decided to exploit its innocence. They lured it into a formation, put it to sleep, and then sealed it eternally. But when the great war between the god race and the devil race erupted, they were forced to release it, and that ended up becoming their second greatest mistake. The long period of sealing, trapped in endless darkness and solitude, corrupted its childish heart. The evil infant will accumulated an overwhelming resentment toward the world. Enraged, it took control of the Moonslaughter Devil Sovereign, using him as its host. In other words, the spirit of the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations. A baby so childish it would kill gods when angered, and so desperate for light and companionship that it would give up everything just to avoid darkness and loneliness. Yes, master, the baby's voice said. There was no shame, only joy. Now you can see the outside world with me, and you will never face loneliness again. But I will not use your power so easily. If they discover that I am the owner of the evil infant wheel of myriad tribulations, I will become the #1 enemy of the primal chaos realm, something I am not yet prepared to be. But do not worry. In the future, there will be no such problem. Renzu said calmly. I will always obey, master. Now tell me, what could allow your powers to recover? I belong only to you, master, so only you can influence my strength. Your anger, resentment, killing intent, blood, hatred, jealousy, and guilt. These negative emotions will strengthen my growth. If your negative emotions suddenly increase to a certain point, my powers may awaken. Renzu smiled calmly. Is that so? Good to know. Now let us leave this place. You must not be able to bear staying in this darkness any longer. Yes, master. Please, the baby's voice said in his mind. He smiled upon hearing his artifact's words and, with composure, extended his hand toward the netherworld Adumbra flower, which would still take some time to mature. A greenish flame appeared on his fingers, taking the form of a small bird. The fire creature flew to the flower and, with its ethereal heat, fully accelerated the maturation process. In just a few moments, the flower was ready to be harvested. Without hesitation, he activated the heavens will crystal body, combining it with spatial laws to collect the herb. The Adumbra flower appeared directly in his hand, and he promptly sealed it before storing it in his spatial ring. Having completed everything he needed, He simply vanished from the lair as casually as if he had never been there. /N. Did you enjoy the chapter? Then you should know that over on my Patreon you can read up to 20 chapters ahead for just $5. And yes, for that price you also get full access to all of my content. That's right. Cheaper than a snack, and with way more drama, action, and guaranteed emotional damage. The link is right below. See you there. My Patreon. Patreon.com/fanficnovels. Thank you so much for your support. You make all of this worthwhile.
Every novel listed in the description comes with permanent access to the audiobook on Telegram. You pay once, and if the novel is still ongoing, you'll receive all future updates automatically. No extra cost. Choose your novel from the description, then DM me on Telegram, WhatsApp, or Discord. After payment via PayPal, Ko-Fi, or Patreon, you'll get instant access. Simple, secure, lifetime listening. Guys, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button. Your support means a lot.